Thank you. Please can I have confirmation that the live stream has started?
Yes, Leader, we're now live.
Before we formally start the meeting, I will go to each councillor present in turn and to confirm that they can hear and be heard. This is a legal requirement for virtual meetings. Where practicable, please also have your video switched on so that you can be seen by those in attendance and the public watching. I will begin with Cabinet members. Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Councillor Chowns.
Yes, Leader, thanks. I can see and hear you.
Councillor Crockett.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I can see and hear you.
Councillor Davis.
Afternoon, Leader. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Councillor Harrington. Councillor Harrington. You were.
Yes, Leader, I can see and hear you. I didn't realise if you're on another window, the space bar doesn't work.
Councillor Harvey.
I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Councillor Tyler.
Yes, Leader, I can see and hear you. Thank you.
Cabinet support members. Councillor Bartlett.
Yes, Leader, I can see and hear you.
Councillor Hardwick.
Good afternoon, Leader. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Councillor Jimman.
Yes, good afternoon, Leader. I can hear and see you.
Councillor Selden.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I can see and hear you, Leader. Thank you.
And I believe Councillor Watson has sent her apologies. I will move on then to group leaders or their representatives and scrutiny chairs. Councillor James.
I can see and hear you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lester.
Yes, Chair, I can see and hear you. Please note, I'm having a little bit of difficulty with my video camera linking to Zoom. So if I'm coming and going visually, I do apologise, but there seems to be a technical error with my camera.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, I can see and hear you at long last. Been having problems. It keeps cutting out, but I'm okay at the moment. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Marsh has sent her apologies. Councillor Diana Toynbee is her substitute. Can you hear and see me?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. I can hear you and see you.
Councillor Gandy.
Yes, I can see and hear you, Leader.
And Councillor Swinglehurst.
And I can hear and see you. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. We also have a number of officers attending who will be introduced as they're called upon. Thank you, and I will now formally open the meeting. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. I've decided to make an alteration to the running order for the meeting, which I will explain later. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and making an official recording. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Microphones should be muted and when you're not speaking. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. As we move through the agenda, in addition to discussion by Cabinet members, I will invite group leaders or their representatives in turn to provide views and questions from their group on each item. Where appropriate, I will also call on scrutiny chairpersons to comment on behalf of their committee. If any attendee loses connection and it is not possible to recover the connection within a reasonable amount of time, the meeting will continue as long as a quorum of Cabinet members remains able to hear the proceedings and be heard. Voting will be undertaken electronically using a voting software within the virtual meeting platform. Only Cabinet members may vote. In the event that electronic voting is not possible to use or there is a technical failure, I will ask each Cabinet member by means of a roll call to indicate if they are for, against or are abstaining. The results of the roll call will only be recorded in the minutes of the meeting where there is a requirement to do so. If a Cabinet member has not been present for the whole of the discussion on an item due to technical failure, they should not vote on that item. So I begin. First item is apologies for absence. Have any apologies been notified to the clerk?
We have no apologies from members of the Cabinet Leader, and just the apologies from Councillors Watson and Marsh that you've already noted.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Are there any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interests for items on the agenda today? I have an interest to declare, as my residential property is close to the end of the planned Southern Relief Road, but I do have a dispensation from the monitoring officer. Item 3. This item has been deferred to a future meeting as the minutes have not yet been published for review. Items 4 and 5 are questions from members of the public and councillors. As all of the questions received relate to the report on the Hereford Transport Strategy Review, we will take those questions later on the agenda, immediately before the presentation of that report. So we move on then to item 6, which is Peterchurch Primary School rebuild, develop design, and this item is to approve the proceeding to the next stage of the rebuilding of the Peterchurch Primary School on the existing site by commissioning a developed design to REBA Stage 3 for a traditional and/or modular build. This item begins on page 11 of the agenda pack. A minor typographical correction has been published to the recommendation B. I will pass this to the Cabinet Member, Commissioning Procurement and Assets, and the Cabinet Member for Children and Families may also wish to comment.
Thank you, Leader. So before you, we have a report for Peterchurch School, and I'm delighted that we are finally in a stage where we are looking to do a feasibility study. I'd like to first thank all of the officers for all of the hard work on getting it to this phase. You've had some challenging conversations with Cabinet around finances and around what is the right thing to do with the school, along with the local community. So thank you for all of your hard work. I'd also like to thank Councillor Chowns for being the person that keeps reminding me of what standards of build we should be doing. So I'm delighted that we're looking at Passive House for this particular build. I'd also like to thank Councillor Harvey for being the constant moan in my ear about money and making sure that we get it for the right price. So the other person who's attending is Councillor Hewitt. So I'd like to extend my thanks to her, firstly for attending, but also for always representing her members in Peterchurch and always making sure that we're doing all that we can for the school. So thank you. I'm not going to go on too much. We've already got a really long meeting, so the report's already there. I will introduce Quinton Mee, who I believe is doing the report today. Quinton, are you shaking your head or nodding?
I'm now nodding. Councillor.
Good, I'm glad. So Quinton will be able to outline the report. I'm happy to pass over to Councillor Norman. It's one of these weird ones where we share responsibility. So mine is assets and Councillor Norman for children. So if you'd like to come in, Felicity, and then perhaps Quinton can introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gemma. Yes, so we've heard how we've reached this point after a very long discussion over many, many years, lots of input, as we've heard from the local community, parish council, local members at different stages and so on. And I'm also really pleased that we're reaching this point. The children and the teachers at this school, again, over many years, have really had challenging circumstances. Those of us who've been out there know the school is in incredibly poor condition, and I'm amazed and impressed at how well they've managed under these really hard conditions. And I think it's it's no credit to us if we allow this to continue. So I really hope we're going to get support for taking this forward. The forbearance of the school, the head, and the children should not be taken advantage of. And we all know that children thrive and do well in good conditions. And so I'm really keen that we do take this forward. I won't say any more, but I think we've covered this pretty endlessly over a number of years. So I hope we can take much of that as read, but I hope we can get your support on this. Thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors. So Peterchurch is located on the Golden Valley. It's a primary school that currently has a PAN of 15 students. what we're looking to do is rebuild it stage by stage. The next stage would be to move to a developed design. So what we've had done already since 2015, £5.5 million was put in the capital funding to rebuild the school. Since that time, there's been a number of consultations around a potential all-through school with Fairfield. A feasibility study was done around how that could be done practically, and this identified a number of transport issues that made it quite difficult to just build a through school, and certain aspects of the transport links would have to be upgraded to be able to do that. So a decision was later made that the Peterchurch would be built on its current site, and since then a feasibility study has been commissioned. The results of that identified that the best way forward, rather than remodeling the current building, would be to build a brand new school on where the current playing field is situated. And in doing so, we would be able to increase the capacity of the school. But also within that brief of the next stage, we want to be in a position whereby should need be required in the future, to make it a bit more future proof, we can actually build that to a one FE school, so a 30 admission number. But it could also be extended in other aspects should we wish to. So it'd be a school that could be invested in again, maybe for a special facility. So that's what we want to achieve. Numbers at the school are good. That I say their planned admission number is 15. They often take more than that. It's Ofsted good, but there are significant issues at the school around suitability, and this is what we need to address. It's an old Victorian building which had a number of annexes added to it. Over the last couple of years, we've had to spend £200,000 just to add sticking plasters to make sure it's still usable by the pupils there, and it requires just short of £500,000 of work over the next 3 years should we not go forward with a new build. So taking these sort of points into account, the best option we found after the feasibility study is to rebuild, and that's what we're going to do this stage by stage. The next stage, what will happen there is we'll get a more accurate costings. There's been a lot of scrutiny around the costs of the high level costings thus far. This will give a more accurate cost, and it will give a bit of a concept of what it will actually look like. So that's what we're looking for a decision today, councillors. I'm hoping to any questions on top of that. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. So any comments and thoughts? It would be helpful if we could keep them fairly brief so we can move on to the other items, but this is a significant project, a significant amount of money potentially being invested in it. Councillor Harvey.
I'll let me do my moaning on about the money bit then. I'm pleased that we've got this coming forward. However, I am disappointed that there hasn't been the enthusiasm in the local community or in the education community up in Peterchurch to grab the opportunity to work together to build a through school for the 21st century for the Golden Valley. That's one of the reasons why we've got more money in the capital programme line, in hope and anticipation that that's the sort of school that we could be aiming to build, and this would be the junior end of it. If it's a school that is going to replicate the kind of intake numbers that the current school is delivering, even with a view to extending at some point in time to 30 pupil per form entry, the money that's being quoted in both paragraphs 23 and 45, which is the line entry that we have in the capital programme at the moment, simply doesn't stack up. This is not new news to any of my cabinet colleagues or to officers, and I'd just like to make it transparently clear at this point that even if that capital line is being used to fund this design phase, that we are not aiming at a design which is going to be coming anywhere close to £10.853 million. It's going to need to be considerably lower than that. And everybody needs to understand that now.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Harvey. Yeah, absolutely, completely agree with you on that, that we need to be aiming at a much lower cost. And as we said, the higher amount was really looking at a through school that is no longer a possibility. What I will say is that I would absolutely like us to think about the school being out in the countryside, identifying for some form of special placements there, especially dealing with mental health issues for children, which we know is just becoming a bigger issue as time goes along. So I would really like to be thinking about what kind of specialty we could be putting in Peterchurch School, and that's something I'll have a chat with Quinton. I know that Felicity is, Councillor Norman is very much behind that idea as well, but I think you're absolutely right. I think perhaps Councillor Norman and I can have that discussion about where we will be capping the feasibility to come back on it. So yeah, absolutely taken on board.
Thank you. Councillor Chowns.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Quentin, for the report. I agree there's a really clear case for rebuilding the school, and that replacement is clearly the best value for money and the least disruptive. I'm really pleased to see items 25A and B in the report about net zero carbon and net biodiversity net gain specification. Really welcome that. And just to note, there are now multiple examples of passive house primary schools across the country, including all around us in Worcester, Wolverhampton, Wales. And so I am really looking forward to this being the first one in Herefordshire, and I hope it will be the first of many, because such buildings, as demonstrated by the very first one in Wolverhampton 10 years ago, can be built at the same price, cost parity to conventional methods, and of course deliver really significant savings over their life cycle. So thank you.
I think, Councillor Chowns, you've answered one of my queries, which is, the suggestion is that passive house will cost a lot more money, and you're saying to me, no, that's not the case. Thank you. I'll move on then to Councillor Harrington. Councillor Hughes, I'll take you at the end, if that's okay. So, Councillor Harrington.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to sort of echo Councillor Harvey's disappointment that we did miss an opportunity here, perhaps, but that was outside of our control, for maybe producing a much larger school, a very good school on an easily accessible site down in the village itself, with potential behind that land that's actually currently for sale behind that school, to put a combination perhaps of Fairfield and the junior school together. That is a shame, and perhaps the window is left open in the future for some variation of that. It certainly seems to me to be a much better siting for Fairfield School, which is a good school but has issues with its accessibility. And on that kind of related basis, Kerry, and I know we've had this discussion before, there is this issue that academies, which I personally, it's a personal opinion, do not support. There is this issue, this feeling that if we put council money into the school, because it is a council school and it is needed, there's no doubt about that. We have a duty to the children in the valley. But do we have any assurances, or do we have a feeling that the school won't, in a sense, academize after we put all our investment in?
I think that question was for Kerry.
Yeah, thank you, councillors. Sorry, Leader, can I answer?
No, you carry on, Kerry.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harrington. We looked into that in some detail, because we did go into some depth about whether the all-through school was viable, and I fully understand the arguments behind that. And one of the technical reasons it was difficult was because one's an academy and the other's maintained, as you say. Peterchurch Primary School wouldn't be allowed to convert to an academy status on its own any longer, because individual schools wouldn't be. But actually, one of the reasons we couldn't bring the two groups or views together across the Golden Valley was because there's quite a lot of opposition to academisation from within Peterchurch Primary School and the governing body there. So I think the chances of it converting are minimal at the moment. I can't say impossible. You know, people move, don't they, and views change. The reason we're asking for this money now is partly because it'll give us a better steer on what is doable there, but we haven't actually closed the door on the through school at some point in the future. I can't say it's imminent, if I'm really being honest, it isn't, but I think at that point the conversation about academisation and conversion would change again. I don't think at the moment we could, my view, I'd support Quentin's report by saying that actually the condition of the building is so poor we need to act on this now. I don't think there's a likelihood of any conversion conversations in the near future. I can't guarantee none in, say, 5 to 10 years' time, but I don't think it's imminent.
Thank you. Councillor Norman.
Thank you. Just wanted to add a quick word. I do absolutely agree with Councillor Davis's point about the potential for having a specialism at some stage. I think that's very important that we have that in mind and consider the possibilities. But I also just wanted to add to Councillor Challenge's comments about the fact that we're aiming for an environmentally sound, carbon neutral build. But I want to ensure that we absolutely include the learning potential from that, so that not just after it's built, but during the process of building, that we incorporate every opportunity for the children at that school to be involved in learning about the process, the how, the why, and all the rest of it. This is done, and there are a number, as we've heard, of, you know, excellent build schools which have done just that. So I just want to, you know, reinforce that. I think it's very important that we incorporate the learning and how and why and all the rest of it, that we are going to be going for this sort of build.
Thank you, Councillor Norman. I think that's probably all from the Cabinet for now, so I'll go to Councillor Hewitt.
Yeah, good afternoon, Cabinet, and thank you for the opportunity for letting me speak for the very wonderful children of Golden Valley North Ward, and many of whom go through Peterchurch Primary School, and their excellent delivery. And I want to pay tribute to the staff there who've struggled for so long. I mean, these initial conversations about a new primary school in Peterchurch started 12 years ago in 2008. And we now have a very good feasibility study, which tells us what we all wanted to hear, which is the most practical, with least disturbance to the children solution, and the cheapest solution is a new build, and the new build would therefore be set back from the road, which would leave lots of space to play with for future developments. And I think that my understanding about what's happening with education in this country is that we really need to be focusing, as recent Royal Survey shows, on early years and mental and emotional well-being in those early years, because that delivers huge rewards later on in life educationally. And I think the Golden Valley, being the most beautiful place in the whole of the county, folks, would be a wonderful place for to have an emotional well-being centre in the future for young people, particularly to serve the young, I think. So yeah, I welcome the report. Thank you very much for getting behind it. I want to say to Councillor Harvey that I think it's called Invest to Save because of the whole building issue, but also because later on in life, giving children a fantastic start means that we have less drag on our social services, and they're more competent and able to go forward in life. So it's been a lot of work done on buildings and educational outcomes. So fantastic that we've got EcoBuild. I think it's the first one. I think Staunton had a stab at it. Staunton on Wye. So they had a new, and I think it's a passive house build. It's a passive build. It may be sort of an EcoBuild. They've got a, yeah, you need to look into it, Councillor Chance, because it's just over the water. So thank you very much. We're delighted. The Parish Council would like me to say that least disturbance to children possible in their educational journey. And I think, the new build will give the least disturbance to the Children's Day. So great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hewitt. We'll comment on that perhaps after the group leaders have expressed the views of their groups and any questions. So I'll turn first of all to Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you, Leader. I don't think that I can improve on Councillor Hewitt's comments, really. She is a member of our group, and as she rightly said, this has been going on for a good many years, and it will be a great asset to the area, the county, and the children of our county. So yes, our group are fully supportive of moving this forward as swiftly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Leader. I support the recommendation. I have to say, I think Councillor Hewitt is right. I don't think this will be the first. I think Webley were some many years ago had some major a new school built, which is powered by biomass.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews.
Yes, Peter, I wholeheartedly support the recommendation. It's obviously a substandard school. I know it very well. And also, what I'm surprised that none of the cabinet members or the local member have not mentioned the previous member for that ward, who in all fairness did an awful lot of work and put everything in place which they've followed up. I thank them for doing it. It was something that was badly needed, and I fully support the recommendation, and I hope everything is done and completed as soon as possible.
Councillor Lester.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Matthews is referring to Philip Price, who I know did a lot of work to try and push this forward. And I was certainly involved in pushing things forward when I was Cabinet Member for Children's Services. And I understand that there are very good reasons why the possibility of a through school is not an option. And I think we have to respect that the views of the local community and just be really grateful for the fact that we have two very good schools. We only have to look at the success that we have had as a council in creating Colwell School. It was a fantastic build there, and just a great example of how successful the council can be in creating a brilliant learning environment. And I was very fortunate to be able to go to Colwell School when it was finished, and the children absolutely loved it, and it completely transformed their learning experience. And I hope to goodness, and I'm sure it will be exactly the same for the children of Peterchurch. I think the staff have been extremely patient, and they all deserve a great school. And the Conservative group wholeheartedly supports this venture. Once again, apologies. I'm sorry I'm having problems with my laptop, but I'm sure you can all remember what I look like. So if my camera does phase in and out, I do apologise.
We can see you fine at the moment, Councillor Lester. So Councillor Selden.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, IOC thoroughly supports this. And congratulations to Councillor Chowns for pushing forward the higher building standards, because that has to become the norm across all building projects that we undertake. But thoroughly support. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Toynbee.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we also support these recommendations. The figures are quite eye-watering for the building, and also for the repairs and maintenance over the past few years. That's been pretty striking. Obviously, as a Green Group, we're really pleased that the plan is to build the school to passive house standards, which is good not only for the environment, but also for running costs and for the children themselves. So take this opportunity to make it a model school for Herefordshire for the 21st century.
Thank you very much. So, Kerry, you've got a green light, lots of enthusiasm for that across all parties. Opportunity to do something really quite special. So I'll put the recommendation then to the to the Cabinet.
Sorry, David. Sorry, Leader. Can I just quickly say, just to thank you for everybody's comments and everybody's commitment to this. I would really, really hope that in the future we don't take as long to get to a point whereby we are at a feasibility study, because by my recollection, over 12 years is not a great thing to happen. So we need to get back into the mode of proactive rather than reactive works. And I'm really grateful, genuinely, to Quinton and Karen and Kerry for actually taking that ethos and running with it. And we've got really good plans coming up so that schools never end up in a position like Peterchurch has. So hopefully that will be our future way of working.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Davis. I should have come back to the Cabinet for any comments. We do want to move on, so if it's all right with everybody, I don't see any hands coming up. So I will go to the recommendation, which is that the Council proceed to the next stage of replacing Peterchurch Primary School and the associated on-site facilities on its current site, and B, the Director, Children and Families be authorised to commission a REBA Stage 3 developed design for the rebuild of Peterchurch Primary School within a budget of not more than £300,000, including fees. I hope I've got that right. So we now go to voting. I will now ask Cabinet members to vote on the recommendation. Please can non-voting attendees be moved to the breakout room and the number of voting members confirmed. If I could have confirmation of the number of voting members, please.
Leader, there are 8 voting members.
So could you please bring up the voting screen?
And they may vote now.
Will you please vote? Thank you.
Leader, those have been unanimously accepted.
Thank you. So we now go back to bring everybody in. Thank you. Thank you. That vote's passed unanimously. So now we move on to the next item, which is an urgent item. In connection with the purchase of accommodation and refurbishment of some properties in Blackfriars Street to meet strategic housing priorities. This is an offer from central government to help fund this particular project. The money has to be spent by the 31st of March, so we need to get on with this, and it does require a vote, a resolution by the Cabinet. It can't just be limited to a Cabinet member, and I do believe that the scrutiny chairs have agreed that this can go ahead. So if the paper could be introduced, please, by Councillor Tyler, Cabinet Member for Housing, Regulatory Services and Community Safety. It's a little bit of a difficult one because it crosses 3 different portfolios, I think, Councillor Tyler, doesn't it?
Yes, thank you, Leader, for introducing that for me. It does cross across 3 council portfolio members. There's a bit of a background to this as well, because it's the way it's come about through the funding from MH6RG. So I'll give you the background to that. So we're going to hopefully support the recommendation today for A to C and spend the money that's been allocated from local government. It's come about from obviously coronavirus, from the 11th of March when there was a pandemic, when it was declared, and it stated that our priority was the indication and support of the most vulnerables in our community. So all street homeless and homeless clients were identified and accommodated in temporary accommodation, ranging from B&Bs, Headley Lodge, Hope Scott House and other forms of temporary accommodation. At that point, up to 120 families were being accommodated at any one time. There were 46 households have been housed permanently, but there are still approximately 90 households in temporary accommodation at this moment in time. The ongoing revenue burden to the council is approximately 15 to 20,000 per week, and from the housing benefits because housing benefits cannot be claimed for those in this form of temporary accommodation, such as B&B. In response to this, the MHCLG announced different funding streams to help local authorities over the cost of increased housing and support. I'm really pleased to say that Herefordshire Council was very successful with bids made and so far been awarded 1.5 million in revenue and capital. I can't thank our officers enough for doing this, Leader, because it's very difficult to secure funding streams, and this has really been helpful for looking after our homeless as we've gone through the pandemic. So today I'm asking Cabinet to accept the award of 420,000. This will enable the Council, as part of the COVID-19 emergency response, to accommodate those who have a long or repeated history of rough sleeping. Capital will be used to assist in the purchase of 8 properties. They will be self-contained accommodation, suitable for homeless clients with disabilities and or accessibility issues, and the refurbishment of 4 and 5 Blackfriars Street. Again, to be used as accommodation for homeless applicants prior to resettlement in sustainable accommodation. The report has been brought here today as special urgency, as you've already mentioned, for a number of reasons, and I need to justify why this has happened. So in October, the grant funding was awarded to the Council. The grant bid was submitted by Adults and Communities and awarded to that directorate. There was then confusion on what governments were required as revenue and capital were awarded. Legal advisor, a separate governance arrangement was required for the capital element. Given the buoyant current housing market and to ensure that the Council is able to give itself as much time as possible to acquire the new housing units within this time limited window, it is required to purchase a property. It is imperative that decision is made prior to Christmas so that properties can be found. Offers can be made on the properties and the process is underway, as Christmas will ultimately delay the process by approximately 3 weeks. There is a limited time window within which MHCLG grant can be spent, and that is by the end of 31st of March, after which any monies remaining will need to be returned to MHCLG. There is still a large number of homeless clients in temporary accommodation, and we hope that by providing this accommodation in the way we would like to today through the report, we can enable that to happen over the next coming months through the winter plan. Thank you, Leader. If Councillor Crocker would like to add any more to that, because of Project Brave, it's part of the ongoing programme with that. I welcome her comments. Otherwise, I'll open it up to the officers for further questions and Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler. Is it okay for me to carry on, Leader?
Yes, please do. Yes.
Thank you. I fully support this agenda item. The proposal is in line with our homelessness prevention and rough sleeper strategy, and also, as mentioned by Councillor Tyler, the Project Brave. This money has been given to us from government, as she's already alluded to, and we need to get on with this and get it started and done before the end of March. So yes, fully support it. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I'm the other one that it crosses across. So just a quick one to say that I fully support the report and the recommendations, and absolutely well done to officers for managing to get these grants. Hayley, I know how much work you put in, so it is appreciated. I really do approve of this, because it's actually making use of the assets that we own, and that's what we need to do more of. We need to identify all the assets that we've got and make sure we're getting the absolute most from them. And Hayley, I'm really glad that you were able to go through this, identify the site, and I think it will add huge value to our homeless people in Herefordshire. So thank you again.
I must confess, when I looked at this, I looked at the figures and I thought, what, £500,000 for refurbishing a property? I thought that's just an extraordinary amount of money. I just want some assurance that that's going to be well spent, well used, well monitored, and all the rest. Hayley, I wonder whether you can comment on that. I mean, it does seem like an awful lot of money.
Thank you, Leader. It does sound an awful lot of money. It's £500,000. It's for the refurbishment of numbers 4 and 5 Blackfriars Street. So that will be conversion to 4 flats and then we're looking to put either an extension or a pod either side. So it will be 6 properties in total, which comes to about £83,000 per property. We're also looking to try and get it as zero carbon as much as we can. So we would be looking at renewable energies. We'll be looking at raising the standards. We'll be looking at reducing the carbon footprint. So installing cycle sheds, encouraging walking, so keeping it a car-free zone. So £500,000 is worst case scenario. We'll go to tender. We'll go out for procurement. We believe we can bring the costs in, but because number 5 is in such a bad state of repair, we're not sure what we're going to unearth. So if 500,000 is maximum, but I'm looking to bring it in below that.
Thank you. And what assurance do we have that local builders will be used, but also produce really good value for money? It's no good using local people who end up charging more.
So we'll go through the tender process. I'm hoping to get an SME. We will build the spec. We will put in the spec what standards we want, and then we will have a surveyor go through the spec with us to make sure that all of what we're requiring has been put into the building. So it will be built into the spec that they will then be paid once those standards are delivered.
Thank you, Hayley. Any other questions from anybody on the cabinet? Okay, well, Councillor Davis, did you want to?
Yeah, just to confirm that Hayley has actually been in conversation with our procurement team around embedding social value, so identifying local businesses that could procure for these contracts. So she's already been working with them for the past couple of weeks. So just to confirm, you were asking about the risk and how are we making sure that we're involving local businesses exactly via the procurement processes. So Hayley's been in conversation with them.
Thank you, Councillor Davis.
Okay, so I'll go to group leaders now, if I may. Councillor James, and then Matthews, and then Lester.
Thank you, Chairman. Support the recommendation. I don't know how you couldn't. I'm still a little bit concerned about the cost, but bearing in mind that one always has to aim high when applying for central government funds, I do hope that the procurement process does reduce that figure substantially, because, you know, at 84, even with the 2 extra units, at 84,000 pounds, that's still very expensive, bearing in mind the build costs. You know, the bulk of most houses are the land value itself, not the actual house, the cost of building the house. So I look forward to seeing the outcome.
Thank you. Councillor Matthews, and then Councillor Lester.
Yeah, you're quite right, Leader. Wherever the money comes from, we have to have value for money. It's taxpayers' money at the end of the day. So you're quite right there. And also, any works that is authorised by this council should be very strictly monitored to make sure we get the right sort of build and to a high standard. So I fully support your comments and I fully support the recommendations. Thank you.
Yes, I did suspect, Councillor Matthews, that what I was saying would be music to your ears. That the sort of thing which I thought you would be concerned for the council. Councillor Lester.
Yes, thank you, Chair. All of the comments, the wise comments, have already been said, and we support the initiative. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Selden.
Also support, Chair, Leader. It's always good to spend central government money where we can get it. And well done, Hayley. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Toynbee.
Yes, thank you. We also support this recommendation, and obviously homelessness in the county is always a huge concern for us, and now we're in December. It's this time of year is even more concern than usual, and actually all who do this funding.
Thank you. Finally, Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, our group fully support this as well, and we'd just like to also thank Hayley and her team for all the work that they've done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't think it hasn't gone to scrutiny. I don't need to ask scrutiny chairs. I don't think there are any questions. Any final comments that any cabinet member would like to make before we move to the vote? Councillor Tyler.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Just to say thank you to everybody supporting the recommendation, and Hayley and her team have worked extremely hard when we realised it had to come through the process, the government process. So thank you and well done again, Hayley. And would like to move to that recommendation, Leader, if that's possible.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for everybody's help in dealing with this item so quickly. It just shows that we can do things quickly, and the money's got to be spent by the end of March. So, yeah, we need to get our skates on. Thank you. So the recommendation to Cabinet members is as follows. Recommendation A, the Cabinet accepts the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government capital grant of £420,000 for the purpose of purchasing up to 8 properties. B, approval is given to purchase up to 8 properties within a budget of £1,120,000 and to refurbish 4 and 5 Blackfriars Street within a budget of £500,000 to enable the council to protect and accommodate those currently in COVID-19 emergency accommodation from future homelessness. And C, that authority to purchase the properties be delegated to the Director for Economy and Place following consultation with relevant Cabinet members and the Chief Finance Officer. I will now ask Cabinet members to vote on the recommendation. Please can non-voting attendees be moved to the breakout room and the number of voting members confirmed.
Leader, there are 8 voting members.
Thank you. Please bring up the voting screen.
Cast their vote now. And they have been unanimously accepted, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll revert to the main, or get everybody back. Thank you.
Does my face look blue or is it just my camera? I think I look like a Smurf a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, that vote was passed unanimously. So we then move on to questions from members of the public. Members of the public continue to have the opportunity to submit questions to Cabinet in writing ahead of the meeting. We have received a number of questions for this meeting and responses have been published as a supplement to the agenda papers. Those who have submitted questions have been given the opportunity to submit a written supplementary or to send an audio or video recording or to join the meeting to ask their questions live. I will now ask the clerk to confirm let us know which questioners have provided supplementaries. So the first questioner was Mr. I. Morgan.
Mr. Morgan has not provided a supplementary question, Leader.
Thank you. So questioner 2 is Ms. N. Goodwin.
Yes, she has provided a written supplementary question, so I will share that on screen and read that on her behalf. She says, the use of the word accepted seems vague. Is it representative of the Cabinet members' individual and collective views on carbon and climate emergency issues, or are they able to assure the public that such issues will be prioritised in accordance with the Council's declaration to set a target of 0 carbon emissions by 2030?
I think all these questions and supplementals are for the Cabinet member, Mr. Councillor Harrington. So,
thank you, Leader. Accepted is the technical term that officers give to responses. Yes, I can give that assurance that that is our ambition, that it is our collective view on carbon and climate emergency issues, and they will be prioritised in accordance with the Council's declaration.
Thank you.
0 carbon emissions by 2030.
Thank you. Moving on then to question 3 from Dr. Geeson.
Again, I have a written supplementary question. In considering the business case for the Southern Link Road, its major role would be to shunt traffic between the A465 Belmont Road and A49 Ross Road. It is likely that if this road were built, in order to escape congestion on the A465 Belmont Road, a greater volume of traffic than now would use the A49 Ross Road to enter Hereford. We have recently learned that only 7% of traffic is through traffic in Hereford and 93% has a source or destination or both within the city. Since the A465 and A49 converge to cross Greyfriars Bridge, do you agree that the Southern Link Road would bring only negligible advantage to traffic flow within Hereford City?
Thank you, Dr. Geeson, for your question. I seem to recall that in the original work, feasibility work for the Southern Link Road, it was indeed projected that would be increased on the A49 down the Ross Road because traffic would move across from the Belmont Road to try and enter Hereford on a different approach. So as a standalone project, it certainly has some difficulties.
Thank you. Question 4 from Mr. Board.
Mr. Board has not provided a supplementary question, Leader.
Thank you. The next one is from Mr. Palgrave.
Mr. Palgrave has submitted a written supplementary. He says, you responded to my question saying it is not correct to say that the Southern Link Road was not included in our assessment. My question did not, however, say that the SLR was not included in the assessment. It said that the SLR is not included either standalone or in combination in the shortlist produced by the assessment. Now I have clarified that. Can I have a response, please?
Thank you, Mr. Palgrave. I think my response was based on that belief that you were, that whatever the case was it being assessed on the Green Book, and I believe that is that's the assurance I've been given. But I will clarify that for you and come back to you with a written answer.
Okay, thank you. And next is Mrs. Prothero, and I think she is attending. Is that correct?
That's correct, Leader.
Okay, Leader, Mrs. Prothero is with us.
Thank you. Mrs. Prothero, you have a supplemental question? I can't see you on the screen, but maybe when you start talking, we will see you. Yes.
Hear me?
Yes, we can see you and hear you.
Oh, good. My supplement.
Okay, Leader, Mrs. Prothero is with us.
Hello. Do you want me to do my
Thank you.
supplementary now?
Mrs. Prothero, you have a supplemental question? I can't see you on the screen, but maybe when you start talking, we will see you.
I can see all of you, and I can see myself. So hopefully, yes.
Yes.
Thank you for your.
Yes, we can see you and hear you.
Oh, good. My supplement.
Okay, Leader, Mrs. Prothero is with us.
Hello. Do you want me to do my supplementary now?
Mrs. Prothero,
Mrs. Prothero, your YouTube is still playing. If you could please mute that.
Ah, right. Sorry, I can see all of you, and I can see myself. So hopefully, yes.
Yes.
Thank you for your.
Yes,
Sorry,
we can see you and hear you.
Sorry, I've just got to get rid of my YouTube. Sorry about that. I had to get rid of my YouTube. My supplementary question is, a further problem in the South Wye area, threatening life and well-being of adults and children, is a crisis of obesity. This area has the highest figure of all age groups in the county, as evidenced in the report on obesity number 12 from Herefordshire Council Strategic Intelligence Team, December 2016. For adults 16 plus, Belmont Medical Practice had an obesity rate of 17.8% compared with 9% nationwide. The figures for prevalence of obesity in reception at school range from 4.9% in this county in Greater Ledbury to 11.7% in South West Wye. Taking into account the need to reduce obesity, especially starting young, what would be the best combination of measures to make lifetime health improvements in the area of South Wye?
Councillor Harrington.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Brother. That's quite a broad question, and I'm not sure I'm the perfect person qualified to answer that. Obviously, whatever support and help we can give in allowing people who live in that area to travel in an active way, and whatever opportunity we can give to reduce the congestion would be a priority. But particularly the ability for children to walk safely to school, and the ability for children to cycle safely to school by themselves or with their parents. That would be a really strong ambition, and it is a possible ambition. It's a matter of priorities, and it's a matter of putting the money and the effort into that strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Harrington.
Thank you. I think you probably will now be removed, Mrs. Prothero. And you can carry on watching us on YouTube.
I'm trying to leave.
Okay, so I now move to the next question. Mrs. Wegg-Prosser, do you have a supplemental question from her?
No, there's no supplemental question for that one, Leader.
Thank you. So Mr. P. Chapman?
Again, we've not received a supplementary from Mr.
Thank
Chapman.
you. Ms. K. Sharp?
Yes, I have a written supplementary from her. So I'll just resume sharing. So Ms. Sharp's supplemental question. When the first planning permission for the SLR was determined in 2015 and 2016, there were lengthy discussions between Historic England and the Council concerning the negative landscape impacts of the scheme. The Planning Officer report records that measures, planting, noise, barriers, etc. would be designed into the scheme, particularly on the railway bridge with its embankment, to mitigate these impacts. The 10 significant engineering changes that I referred to in my original question were first identified in 2017, but were never progressed through planning, and included, amongst other things, raising the height of the railway bridge by ½ a metre. If planning permission is sought for the major changes, will the landscape considerations that were so controversial in 2016 be thoroughly re-examined, given the structures along the entire route will have to be significantly widened, extended and increased in height?
Councillor Harrington.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sharp, for your question. The answer is I'm not entirely sure. I mean, modifications will be needed, there's no doubt about that, and as a result, a view on that would be needed from the planning officers and either a modification within the existing permission or new permissions. And I should imagine that if that is the case, the other considerations will have to be taken into account, but I'll get you a written answer from the planning head of planning on Herefordshire Council to clarify that.
Thank you. Questioner number 10, Mr. Meadows.
Again, Mr. Meadows has a written supplementary question. He says, percentages are meaningless when the average journey time is not referenced at all. This was acknowledged by Amy in their 2010 report when they explained that a statistic which is easier to understand and relates well to public perception is the journey time analysis. The Amy report showed that a bypass would only improve a north-south journey time by just 1 minute more for cars than if sustainable transport measures were introduced, and before allowing for the effect of induced demand from the new road. Can WSP confirm that all the percentages on journey time savings they have referenced for vehicles are on average less than 5 minutes, and that many of these journey time savings can be achieved more simply and cheaply by implementing sustainable transport measures?
I think, Councillor Harrington, that you may be able to answer that question, but alternatively, it could be one put to WSP at the debate.
Perhaps we could pick that up in the discussion, yeah. That is a good point.
Thank you very much.
It's a valid point. It's something people understand much better than percentages, yeah.
Yeah, let's not forget to include that in our discussion. And finally, Ms. Morawiecka. Do we have a supplemental? Hopefully I've got that pronounced better this time.
We do indeed have a written supplementary, Leader. Now the report is published, the answer is on page 7 of the evaluation report. This states that morning peak traffic flows have increased on Edgar Street by 21 to 25%, and evening peak flows have increased 32 to 68%. Whilst the City Link Road has reduced vehicles on Newmarket Street, Blue School Street, it appears that this was at the expense of other roads, particularly residential ones such as College Road, with vehicles up 42% and 15%, and Vens Lane up 14% and 8%. This new road has increased car use, congestion and air pollution on Edgar Street despite being part of the AQMA. With the changes in traffic volumes miles out from that modelled, and with some of the impacts particularly detrimental to residential areas and around schools and colleges, how can councillors have any confidence in the modelling for future road building?
That's a somewhat rhetorical question, I think, there, Councillor Harrington.
Well, it is a rhetorical question, but it's a fair question. And I think it's one that we've addressed in the past. We've discussed this issue, that the fact that when we commission reports, it's often best to try and stay away from specific metrics, because you tend to concentrate on them for all sorts of reasons. And it's particularly important to look at the strategic effort, the strategic ambition that you're trying to achieve. But that said, you need to monitor the projections that consultants give you, to have faith in them, and you need to follow up and see how the predictions line up with the realities after the event. And I think they don't always line up very well, and that is for a variety of reasons, and is sometimes unavoidable. But I think it's just something to bear in mind when we are looking forward at projections, that they are at the end of the day assumptions made either on data or on qualitative expertise.
Thank you, Councillor. I think
a bit of a long-winded question is saying yes is something to bear in mind.
Thank you. That's the end of the questions from members of the public. Thank you for your interest. We'll now move to questions from councillors. We received one question from a councillor for this meeting, and a response has been published as a supplement to the agenda. Again, a councillor who submitted questions has the opportunity to submit a written supplementary, or send an audio or video recording, or join the meeting. The question we have is from Councillor Shaw. Is Councillor Shaw present?
No, he's not able to join us, Leader, but he has submitted a written supplementary question.
Thank you.
He thanks you for your answer and asks, to be clear, can you confirm that this administration has not ruled out congestion charging, and that a workplace parking levy will also be considered in Hereford?
I can confirm that we've pretty much ruled out congestion charging, but we haven't ruled out a workplace parking levy. And in actual fact, both of those elements factor very heavily in the packages for the Western Bypass.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we move on to item 6, which is to consider the findings of the Hereford Transport Strategy Review and the peer review of the South Wye Transport Package and Hereford Transport Package recommendations made by the General Scrutiny Committee, and determine any strategy proposals to be taken forward. This item begins on page 103 of the agenda pack. I'd like to introduce this subject, and then I'll pass over to Councillor Harrington. So this discussion is probably the most eagerly awaited discussion that the Cabinet of this Council has had for some time. It was a significant issue in the last election. By that time, the Council had already declared a climate emergency, but since then, consideration of the state of our planet has been even more of a subject of concern. Over the past 18 months, I have become more convinced than ever that our decision to pause and review the decision relating to the Southern Relief Road and the Western Bypass was the right one, Not only do we have an increased concern for our environment, confirmed by politicians at a national level, who have been openly questioning the justification for building more roads, and which we have seen for ourselves in the flooding in February, but we also have the COVID crisis. COVID has been a life-changing shock. We do not know yet the fallout, but it seems likely that COVID will impact forever on our work and travel patterns. So I believe that the pause and review decision and the time taken to represent the data has been very timely and worthwhile. As councillors, we hold the county in our hands as a piece of real estate, but more importantly, as residents of Herefordshire, those who've lived here for generations and those who've moved here, in many cases because they appreciate all that this county represents. For those seeking good, fulfilling employment, those who are seeking to develop a business, a good place to bring up a family, a place for education, which is becoming increasingly important with the news about NMIT, and for those who come to retire. We take our responsibility, in the words of the county plan, to respect our past and shape our future. We take that very seriously. So I and the Cabinet welcome this opportunity to consider the recommendations made in this report, and I will ask Councillor Harrington to further introduce this discussion.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'd like to thank everyone that has put their time and effort into this process, the Hereford Transport Strategy Review, the officers and the transport consultants who have worked extremely hard on this, the stakeholder groups that have given us their time and consideration, the political groups who have fed back, the ward members and the parish councillors, our valued local businesses, and our members of the public. I'd also like to thank the members of the General Scrutiny Committee for their long and thoughtful deliberations a few weeks ago, and we will try to respond to all your recommendations in the debate later. I'll keep things fairly short and simple for now and look forward to a good discussion in the room after the presentation from our officers and transport consultants, views from the group leaders, and feedback from the Chairman of Scrutiny. At the end of the debate, we will need as a Cabinet to make some decisions and outline our collective view on the best way forward, not just for Hereford, but for Herefordshire's future transport strategy. The issue of transport in the city and the county is a long-standing and emotive subject. Everyone has an opinion on our congestion, on the subject of a bypass, on our buses, on our school transport, on our cycling, and on our walking infrastructure. Be assured that the decisions we make today will be based on a sound evidence base and with the intention of achieving the best, the quickest, the most efficient improvements to our transport networks. Foremost in our mind will be a desire, a determination to protect our environment and to support our economy, to give all our extremely precious businesses who are having a tough time at the moment the best conditions in the quickest time possible to thrive, and all residents the best opportunity to live good, healthy, productive, and happy lives in the county. Decisions we make today in the room will be honest, true, with honest, true intention, and with a view to what is the best future for Herefordshire. When we make those decisions, you may agree with them, you may not. But believe me, we have given this matter an extraordinary amount of time and thought. If you don't agree, and we can't persuade you otherwise over the next few years, we'll answer at the ballot box. That's life, that's politics. The very worst thing we could do as politicians, as your elected local leaders, is to do only what we think is popular, what will get us re-elected. We are not in the business of simply trying to get elected. We are here as a coalition, as an alliance, because we care about our communities and we want the very best for Herefordshire. And with that, I shall hand over to officers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Harrington. I'm just wondering, Sarah, are you able to launch the presentation? That's great, thank you. I'll have to say next slide a couple of times just to get to the first substantive slide. And just pausing on that one, Sarah, if you could just go back one. We've got a running order for the session that's been discussed with the leader. So point 3 there will be the technical presentation of the work that we've done, and then the remainder of the session there is for discussion and to introduce the scrutiny comments and the political group comments. So if you can move forward, please. Thank you. So just a very brief introduction. The scope of the review was set out in the Cabinet Decision Report earlier this year, 24th of January. And essentially two substantive pieces of work to do. Firstly, was the peer assessment to the Southern Link Road and the Western Bypass. And that was looking backwards at the work and the evidence base for both of those projects. And running in parallel with that and the work that we've been doing through this year is the Transport Strategy Review. And those two pieces of work were commissioned and procured through the public realm contract and through open tender. And we've got with us today Martin Revel from Mott MacDonald, who's led on the peer assessment work and also critical friend review, which has helped inform the final reporting for the strategy review work. Martin Brooks from WSP, who's led on the transport strategy review. Next slide, please, Sarah. Thank you. And just to reference, since completion of those two pieces of work, we have been to scrutiny meeting on the 9th of November, and we've got a range of recommendations which we'll get to later in the discussion. And I've just summarised there in terms of the types of recommendations that we've got, but it's probably better that we focus on those when we get to that point of the discussion. So next slide, please. And just a reminder of the recommendations that we're looking at with the Cabinet today. Just a quick run through those, particularly item B, which is to look at preferred strategy going forward following the review, to work through the recommendations that have been put forward by General Scrutiny Committee. Indication that subject to Cabinet's decision, officers are likely to be required to make a further report to confirm the details of taking that work forward. And recommendation either is to provide a definitive response in terms of whether or not to progress the Southern Link Road and the Western Bypass and the four different options that Cabinet will be looking at responding to. The next slide, please, Sarah. So I'll now introduce Martin Revel from Mott MacDonald. He's going to present the findings of the peer assessment. Later on, Martin will also input into the review work in terms of the critical friend role. And I'll just hand over to Martin. Thank you, Martin.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks very much, Steve, and good afternoon, Leader and members. Thank you very much. Today, I'm here to cover two small pieces of work that have been undertaken by Mott MacDonald in supporting Herefordshire in its Hereford Transport Strategy Review. And Sarah, could you move on a couple of slides? The second one, that one's not really, that's the one, thank you. So just the first two elements is a technical peer review of work undertaken prior to the development of the Hereford Transport Strategy Review, of which I'm sure Martin Brooks will say more in a moment. There were three aims to our peer review shown in the principal boxes within this slide. In essence, our peer review posed two questions. Is the recent historical work sound in relation to the Department for Transport's Transport Analysis Guidance, which is often referred to as TAG? And secondly, did this historical work, which led to the two packages, come to the correct conclusion? Now, in establishing whether the packages had been developed in a way that is consistent with guidance and led to the development of packages that are essentially sound and justified, we looked both back, cataloguing issues that were considered serious concerns or issues that, while not fundamentally flawed, might have been done differently. But we also looked forward, specifically identifying matters relating to the climate emergency, as well as to other technical aspects that might be considered when taking any future strategy development forward. If we could move on, Sarah. Now, the Herefordshire Core Strategy is a key driver in identifying the need for supporting infrastructure, which, as I'm sure you're all aware, formed part of the local plan adopted in 2015 following examination in public. Extensive technical work was undertaken to support the core strategy, and while our peer review is not intended to be an evaluation of the transport infrastructure aspects informing that core strategy, this work does provide an important context in respect of the development histories of both the Hereford Transport Package and the South Wye Transport Package. The core strategy includes the statement that you can see on screen now, and it also ensured that the transport infrastructure requirements were underpinned by a considerable technical evidence base, encompassing many other studies that led to the adoption of that core strategy. Now, this was the starting point in undertaking our peer review, and our task was then to examine whether the subsequent work was to develop investment plans beyond the adoption of that core strategy was taken forward appropriately through the steps of the transport appraisal process in a way that is Department for Transport tag compliant. Could we have the next slide, Sarah, please? The headline conclusion, looking at the Hereford transport package, is that the process of package development for this package is in line with transport analysis guidance and the transport appraisal process. There is a large volume of technical work that has been undertaken to support the development of that package. The key issue that we identified through the peer review is that there are options that were discarded that could address, at least in part, some of the problems identified in Hereford. Typically, the options which are shown to meet objectives would be carried forward to further appraisal. However, here only the best performing options had been taken forward, combining active mode proposals alongside the highway proposals. Having said that, there's nothing that we've identified that indicates that the package is fundamentally flawed or any evidence which suggests that it should be revisited immediately. However, we would recommend that if the package is progressed at some point in the future, the opportunity is taken to look at some of those discarded options again as part of developing any business case. And could we move on once more? Thanks, Sarah. For the South Wye package, there are similar issues with respect to those discarded options, which could potentially have been retained. And again, if you do choose to progress this package or move forward with these proposals, we'd recommend that some of those options are looked into again more closely. In both cases, the work on carbon and the climate emergency falls short of current policy and ambitions. It's probably worth noting that both nationally and locally, technical guidance hasn't kept pace with the policy ambitions in this respect. There are some fundamental differences to the South Wye package when looking at this compared to the Hereford package. It's only less than a quarter of the Hereford package in cost, and secondly is much further progressed, and we know now as well that it's a locally let funded proposal, but I understand also that DFT has been involved in discussions and has confirmed it's got no comments. And I think this involvement from DFT should provide assurance that the package has been progressed on a sound basis. And that was all I just wanted to say by way of introducing our peer review. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I'm going to hand over to another Martin now. This is Martin Brooks from WSP, who's led on the strategy review, which obviously been carrying out in parallel with the peer assessment work. And Martin Revel from MOTS is going to provide a bit of input partway through the presentation to explain to Cabinet how the critical friend role worked in the finalisation of the work done by WSP. So I'll throw over to Martin Brooks now. Good afternoon, Martin.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon, everybody. My presentation draws on information contained in the main WSP report. As you'll be aware, that report does contain a lot of detail, and I don't intend to replicate that today. Instead, I'll be presenting on the key stages in our work and giving a summary of our findings. If you could move on, please, Sarah, and on to the next one as well. Thank you. So this slide shows the different stages in the review in the central column. And it's important to recognise that we did go back to first principles. We identified the key challenges and a baseline of current conditions. Once we'd done that, we were then able to agree a set of strategy objectives. We then identified a long list of possible options, some of which were new and some of which had been examined previously within Hereford, and then assessed those options. And moving further down that central spine, the next stage was to actually discard some options at that stage and bundle the remainder into various packages. And we then subjected those packages again to further assessment, and it's that assessment which forms the basis of our findings. We engaged the public and other stakeholders at different stages of the review. On the right-hand side, in the pink boxes, you'll see the public. They were engaged at the beginning. and asked about their views on the key challenges. And at that same point in the review, they were also asked their opinion on some of the schemes and different sorts of interventions which might emerge, which is why they're also shown further down the diagram against the assessment stages. On the left-hand side, you'll see we assembled a stakeholder reference panel. Some 25 organisations were asked if they wished to participate, and typically about half that number did. We engaged them at 2 points in the review, but overall they contributed views on all stages of the study, either commenting on what we'd done or guiding us as to what needed to be done in the next stage. And members were engaged at the same 2 points in the study. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see that we also had the critical friend inputs from Mott MacDonald in the final part of the review. And the next slide, please. So just before we go any further, just to echo some of the points really that were being made by Councillor Harrington, I think it's important to reflect on the uncertainties inherent in the review. We live in unprecedented times, is a frequently used phrase at the moment, certainly in respect to COVID, and we do not know how that's going to pan out in the short term, the medium term, or indeed the longer term. We know that travel behaviours changed once during lockdown. They changed again as we got various relaxations, and they continue to change as we move through various levels of restrictions. This increases the level of uncertainty which is implicit within any study which involves forecasting into the future. We are using both qualitative and quantitative information, and whilst I believe the comparison between options is sound, we do need to be more cautious over the absolute levels of the quantitative data, and we should treat that as indicative rather than absolute. And the next slide, please. In deciding how we would carry out the review, we settled on identifying 4 strategy objective areas, which are shown here: climate emergency, economy, environment, and society. It's normal practice in studies of this kind to include economy, environment, and society, but we decided to add climate change to reflect the increasing importance of this globally, nationally, and locally. And you'll see on the slide some of the different aspects of these 4 areas. I won't read them all out, but you'll see reference to things like zero emissions, the efficient movement of people and goods, reducing air pollution, protecting the natural and built environment, and improving public health, just to name a few. Can you move on, please? Now, the final report shows all the detail of our assessment framework. In summary, what we've done is we've got the 4 objective areas I just talked about. We've then got 16 outcomes, and that drills down into things like carbon emissions, embodied carbon, impact on communities through severance and noise, reliable journey times, access to key employment areas. But we then have a further layer of 35 indicators. 10 of those use outputs from the transport model, and 25 are qualitative. The framework also includes an assessment of public acceptability, deliverability, and affordability. And this is where we pick up issues like legislative challenges, timescale, cost, both capital and revenue, risk, and value for money. And the next one, please. So the next stage was to identify a long list of options, and we identified 18 in total. They range from relatively small scale interventions, such as safer routes to school and the new generation of shared mobility solutions, through things like investment in bus services to major road schemes, such as both the Western and Eastern Bypass. Indeed, we've got 4 variants of road schemes to the east of the city, which is why they're labelled 15A through to 15D on the slide. And this list was generated by reference to previous work, but also inputs from stakeholders, from members and officers, plus views from colleagues across WSP. And the next one, please. We then assessed those 18 options against the indicators and the outcomes. Now, this was a key point of engagement with the stakeholder reference panel and members, getting their views on which options they wish to see taken forward and which should be discarded. And we ended up discarding 4 options: the ultralight rail option, removing traffic signals on the A49, and the 2 full Eastern Bypass options. We took the other 14 options into the next stage of the study. And the next, please. We then had to decide how to best group the options that were left, the 14, and it was clear that no single option would meet all the objectives, so we needed to group them together in some form. Now, we did this in 2 stages. The first stage was to group like-minded interventions together as shown on this slide. So, for example, we formed Package A, that's focused on walking and cycling, but also includes items such as safer routes to school, promotional campaigns, shared mobility, and the like. If you look at Package B, you'll see that that was formed by grouping together all those options which involve buses. Likewise, Package C contained measures for managing traffic demand. And D, E, and F contained the 3 road schemes we agreed to take forward to this stage of the assessment. So D is the Western Bypass, that's the A49 to A49. E is the Eastern Link, that's from Rotherwas to the A438 Ledbury Road. And F is the Eastern River Crossing, which is Rotherwas through to the B4224 Hampton Park Road. And the next one, please. We then had to decide how best to combine these packages into sensible combinations to assess their impact on meeting the objectives for the study. And we decided on 6 combinations as shown on this slide. A few things to note here. So Package A focused on walking and cycling, as I said earlier. This is included in all combinations as well as being a package in its own right. And this is due to the elements which comprised Package A performing well in the option assessment and concluding that they should be implemented no matter what else is included. If you move then to the right, you'll see A plus B then adds the bus-based elements. A plus B plus C adds the demand management. In the bottom row, we have the 3 containing the road schemes. So A plus C plus D, Western Bypass, A plus C plus E, and A plus C plus F. I think it's important to note that the road schemes are being tested within combinations which include investment in walking and cycling and demand management. And a final observation on this slide, there are obviously many other possible combinations which we could have tested, but we consider the 6 we identified as the most logical. Just by way of example, the stakeholder reference panel and the members suggested about 25 to 30 different combinations which we could have tested at this stage in the study, but we had to rationalise that number to keep our assessment at a sensible level. Martin, the next slide I think is yours. This is about the time that you undertook your critical friend input. If you want to cover this.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah. Yeah, by way of introduction to the critical friend process, I think it's worth providing a little context. Firstly, it's important to note that the initial technical review took place in quite a compressed time frame at the end of September. And my team and I therefore focused on some of the fundamental strategic issues, particularly around objectives and packaging and their presentation. I've also provided some commentary on future uncertainty when making policy and strategy decisions and how alternative approaches to transport strategy development might account for uncertainty going forward. And Martin has already highlighted this too at the start of his presentation. The critical friend review was undertaken on a draft version of the Hereford Transport Strategy, and this gave officers and the WSP time the opportunity to reflect upon our review and what I said in my final conclusions, and to update the final report where appropriate. And finally, it's worth noting that there has been a very strong collaborative approach over many weeks since the Mott MacDonald team undertook its initial critical friend review, and has been significant discussion on the transport strategy review between Martin Brooks, officers and myself throughout October and November. So to some headlines. Firstly, on the balance and clarity of reporting against objectives, I noted that reporting should represent a balanced scorecard illustrating the performance of packages tested against adopted objectives to tackle the climate emergency, to achieve Hereford's growth and economic ambitions, and to meet environmental and fair society objectives. And I think you'll see in the reporting the spider diagrams which were incorporated within that illustrate this effectively. It's also important at this point in strategy development to look across the range of objectives and the metrics against which the impact will be measured. And it's worth reflecting here that the recent review of Green Book, which is government's guidance on best practice appraisal and therefore a vital tool for ensuring value for money for taxpayers, which was only published last week, and which places renewed emphasis on the strategic case for investment and focuses guidance on ensuring that options for investment will be assessed first and foremost on whether they deliver relevant policy objectives. It also amply illustrated, the work now I think amply illustrates which of the tested packages do so. I want to say now that the work as presented by Martin and his team enables members to pursue a package that delivers the economic and social objectives you want to achieve. It also amply illustrates which tested packages do so in a way that best fits with your objectives to tackle the climate emergency and deliver other environmental benefits. The evidence is now there, I think, in the reporting, and subsequent discussions through October and November have focused on enabling this to be brought clearly to the fore. On a related point encompassing the packaging of options, I noted that it needed clear presentation and explanation of how the packaging of combinations has been tested, and that was essential in reporting. That there's clarity on the contribution of specific packages to the achievement of the objectives, and that the signposting where the contribution of specific elements can be found in the evidence base. And I also noted that it was important to emphasise that all tested packages incorporate package A, the active travel measures, and that Martin has already referred to clearly in his presentation. Finally, on presentational matters, the level of detail available for some options was something I'd reflected upon. And it's important that the presentation of all options clearly illustrate the contributions to strategy objectives fairly and evenly. Now, obviously, it's understandable, given the history of some of the proposals that were in the review, that more detail is available for some options than others. Hence, stressing the importance of focusing on the achievement of the high-level objectives at this stage, where each option and package can be viewed equitably, regardless of any detailed analysis available for some options. I was also asked to have a look at reflect on induced traffic, over which there have been some concerns, and I concluded that the reporting on induced traffic is fair and reflects recent research. And finally, COVID-19 and future uncertainty. And throughout 2020, the impact of COVID-19 has demonstrated very clearly the uncertainty of the future, even in the short term. And others have already referenced in their introductions to this section the impact of that and the uncertainty that it's brought. Now, technological innovation, travel behaviour change, as well as the impact of COVID, all lead to deep uncertainty around how we plan for transport in the future. Understanding the impact of COVID-19 and these other uncertainties on a future society in which working, education, leisure and consequent travel patterns have changed so dramatically in a short period of time suggests an alternative approach to future planning may be appropriate, such as vision-led scenario planning, rather than being reliant solely on a central model forecast. And the Green Book revision, again, which I referred to earlier, published only last week, is helpful in emphasising this point, indicating that what is required is a strong strategic case focused on place, not solely a business case for investment focused on a benefit cost ratio or BCR that may not reflect either your local objectives or central government's ambitions for levelling up and broader social policy outcomes. Data will still need to be used to differentiate approaches within the strategy. However, it's vital that an over-reliance on metrics which may no longer be valid or appropriate do not cloud your council's vision for the future Hereford transport strategy. Thank you.
So if we go on to the next slide, Sarah, please. I think we're back now. I'm back. So what did we find in our assessment? there were the 6 combinations that we assessed, if you recall. Some points to bring out here from the slide. So there are both similarities between the different combinations, but there are also some key differences. In terms of similarities, it's package A which drives most of the society benefits. And as that's included in all 6 combinations, there's really very little difference in the society benefits which each combination generates. However, there are some key differences in the climate, emergency, economy and environment areas, which I'll cover on the next slide. A word about public acceptability. The responses we've received show general approval on interventions around such things as walking and cycling and bus travel, but we do know that there are some very polarised views around the road schemes. And the next slide, please. So this slide reproduces a page from the report and gives a fairly high-level summary of how the different combinations perform against the 4 objective areas. I'm not going to read it all, but just to give some headlines. And the headlines are that for climate emergency, it is the combinations which do not contain a new road scheme which perform best in terms of greater reductions in carbon emissions and in terms of lower levels of embodied carbon in the new infrastructure. For the economy, it's the other way around, with the combination which includes the road schemes providing the highest levels of congestion relief, although the non-road combinations also provide noticeable improvements in congestion and delays on the network. For environment, the road schemes create a significant adverse impact on Hereford's natural and built environment. The impacts of the non-road combinations is much smaller. And as I said earlier, the differences in the society impacts is really quite small across all 6 combinations we assessed. The next 6 slides, if we just come on to the first of those 6 to start with, these show the radar diagrams or the spider diagrams that Martin was just talking about, and these are all included in the final report. Their aim is to produce a simple, at-a-glance view of how well each combination performs against the 4 objective areas, and you'll see down the left-hand side the 16 outcomes. And the way this works is that the more greens and the further towards the outside of the radar diagram you are, then the better it is, with higher levels of benefits being generated. The closer to the centre you are, and the more reds you get in place of greens, that indicates that the combination is causing adverse impact. So for package A, which is on the screen at the moment, this shows a fairly well-balanced performance against the 16 outcomes. They're all greens, apart from a couple of amber or neutral scores, which you can see under the environment side. We move on to the next slide. This is for package A plus B. This shows a similar pattern, although several greens have moved slightly further out to indicate a higher level of benefits. One green has actually converted to neutral under climate emergency around the level of embodied carbon, but overall it's slightly better than package A on its own. If you come on to A plus B plus C, again, this is very similar to A plus B with really only minor changes in the colours. However, if we move on to the next one, there is a significant difference now with A plus C plus D. So this is the one with the Western bypass added on to the walking and cycling and demand management. And here you see a very strong performance in the economy and social segments. So that's top left and bottom right. But you'll see some adverse impacts being identified under climate emergency and the environment. And you can see there's a far less balanced set of impacts compared to the 3 combinations which did not include a road scheme. If you move on to the next one, A plus C plus E, again, similar story, slightly different in that the colours are in slightly different positions in some instances, but it's a very similar story. Economy and society perform well, but there are adverse impacts on both the environment and climate emergency. And if you move on to the next one, which is just the Eastern River crossing, again, a similar pattern emerges. The next slide draws all those radar diagrams together. And I appreciate it's at a very small scale on this slide, but hopefully this shows the relative performance of the 6 combinations of packages we've assessed in the review. Just to stress, this part of the assessment looked at how the different combinations performed against the study objectives and the outcomes. But as I said earlier, we also looked at some other areas in our assessment. And the first of these is covered on the next slide, which looks at affordability. So the top left-hand box, this shows the capital cost of the 6 combinations. The most expensive is A plus C plus D, the one that includes the Western Bypass, at about £260 million. The cheapest is package A, focused on walking and cycling, which comes in at about 57. You will of course recognise that even the cheapest combination is still not cheap. £57 million is still a considerable sum of money. The top right-hand side shows the revenue costs. This shows a different profile, with those including the bus elements, especially the electric hopper bus and the school bus service, having a larger amount of revenue funding to cover anticipated ongoing subsidy requirements. The bottom left-hand box shows value for money. This is based on the cost and the extent to which a combination of packages meets the study objectives. And it's package A which provides the highest value for money, and the one with the Western Bypass provides the lowest value for money. The bottom right-hand corner covers funding. It's normal for other organisations, central government, different departments, the LEPs perhaps, to fund transport-related interventions of the types that we've considered in this review, usually via some form of bidding process. In our view, it's package A will be easier to fund for the reasons that are given on the slide. We move on to the next slide. Just a few words about public acceptability and deliverability. So in terms of public acceptability, I think it's fair to say that some things are liked by most people, but some of the interventions, particularly the road schemes, do have polarised views. In terms of deliverability, in summary, package A is relatively straightforward to deliver. Package B, which includes the buses, does have a legislative challenge over how to introduce an electric hopper bus service in the city, which stems back to the 2017 Bus Services Act. In terms of A plus C plus D, the details around, A plus B plus C, the details around potential demand management approaches have not been agreed, but some of those could be contentious and they could be drawn out, things like workplace charging, for example. And in the bottom bullet, the road schemes, they will almost certainly have a fairly long and drawn out planning process to negotiate. And the next slide is my final slide. And this is word for word from the concluding remarks in the final report. And if I can just read this in full. Whilst the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the uncertainties of forecasting into the future, the strategy review was undertaken in a manner which enabled all options and packages to be assessed in a consistent and transparent manner. As such, even though there must inevitably be a degree of uncertainty over future transport patterns and traffic levels across the city, the review provides a robust basis on which to make comparisons between a wide range of different possible approaches. It therefore provides the Council with important information beg your pardon, to help decide what transport vision it wishes for the city. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Martin and Martin. Councillor Harrington, I think we're at the stage now where we're happy to take questions through yourself or through the chair.
Okay, Chair, do you want me to lead it, or would you like to lead it? I think you probably.
Yeah, I'll drive for a little while. Okay, so comments.
Or cycle.
Or cycle. Yes, thank you. Well, yes, I won't go there. Okay, so comments and questions from Cabinet. Who would like to start? John, are you going to start?
Yes, I'll abuse my position and go first if that's all right. I just want to thank both Martins for the work they've done in this. You know, especially Martin Brooks is a tremendously detailed and a very extensive and quite an encompassing review. So we do appreciate the time that you've taken over this, and we appreciate you coming back and answering our questions regularly. One question I had for Martin Revel is just on the subject he mentioned in relation to the peer review of the Southern Link Road. You implied that the DfT, you know, didn't necessarily express a view by saying no comment because you know, if they had a problem with the business case, they would have said so. I don't know if you know, Martin, I'm sure you probably do, that we never submitted a business case for the Southern Link Road. So we had an outline case. We never submitted our strategic case. But that's just an important point to note. They may well have had a different view or otherwise once they'd seen that report. And I think that's oh no, one other question that struck me, two other questions that struck me, sorry, for Martin Brooks. Martin, I don't know if I asked you at the time, but the 57 million figure for cycling in Hereford, for cycling infrastructure, walking infrastructure, cycling infrastructure, it seems intuitively quite high, although I do know that we looked at putting routes between the market towns, and that was much, much higher than I thought. But I do notice that Manchester, which is a much bigger city, is sort of implementing a city-wide network improvement for, you know, not much more than that, maybe yes. I mean, we're probably at a quarter of that, but we're considerably smaller as a city. Are you sort of confident that those estimations are kind of ballpark? They're pretty accurate?
They're based on work which has been done previously in terms of developing active travel schemes across the city, and then pro-ratering that to be citywide because the work that was done wasn't citywide. So there's an element of uncertainty around those, but I think in ballpark, the walking cycling element was 45 million out of the 57. The balance is then the cost of things like the mobility hubs, for example, which I seem to recall came in at about 7 million. The expanded park and choose sites. So I think as a ballpark, I am comfortable with it. I would, however, make the observation that they are works that are scalable within Package A. So it isn't like a large piece of infrastructure where everything has to be done at the same time. Package A is a combination of many different smaller elements all working together. So hence it is scalable, and it is of course capable then of being programmed in over a number of years as budgets permit.
Thank you.
Sorry, I went on mute. Councillor Chowns.
Thanks. I've got some comments, but Leader, can I just ask you a question first, which is, are we likely to have a comfort break during this meeting?
What is the...
Are you planning one or not?
Yeah, we can have... we've been doing nearly 2 hours, so I think perhaps after the cabinet, after we've had our discussions now, before it goes to statements from the group leaders, I'll break then for 5 minutes.
Great, thanks for the clarification. I wanted to say that I welcome this study. I think it does give us the evidence base to support the change that we know is needed, you know, a change in direction for transport strategy in Herefordshire. And while I disagree with some of the details, notably some of the scoring of some of the items and the assessment of options and packages, overall I do think that we have the evidence here to underpin that new vision. I welcome the observation from McDonald's about the fact that we need vision-led transport planning. You know, COVID has changed things, old models are a poor basis for planning for the future. And I noted the element in the report, I think it was from them, saying that, you know, we need transport planning has moved on from predict and provide to decide and provide in an agile responsive strategy. And I think that that is what we need to do and are committed to doing as a coalition. I also noted the reference to what central government wants us to do, Grant Shapps emphasising that public transport and active travel need to be the first choice options. And I'm very pleased to be able to agree with him on that. I think it's important to say, you know, as a Green, that this isn't just about recognition of the climate and ecological emergency. It's really important that it's about a kind of holistic vision for our city. We want to basically invest in making it easier for people to come into the city, not easier for people to bypass it entirely. You know, we want our city to be more livable. We want it to be more attractive to visitors, to shoppers, to people who, you know, want to live there, study, and so on and so forth. And I'm really excited that what comes out of this report is stuff that we can do quickly and that will make a really, really big impact, and that it's the highest value for money as well. I just wanted to share a few killer stats that jumped out from me from reading the detail of the report, because I know not everybody will have the chance to read the hundreds of pages. So just a couple of these. Page 154, only 7% of traffic is through traffic. And that's just complete, you know, by itself, completely gives the lie to the idea that a by. There's a really interesting map on page 144, really encourage people to look at it. 80,000 trips a day within the city boundaries, of which half are within, you know, the same quarter of it, the same quadrant. So those are really, really short trips. Most of them, the majority of them, done with one person in one car. And so if we can take measures to change that, that more than anything will transform the experience we all have of the city. One more killer stat about transport: 25% of households in Hereford have no access to a car or a van. Now, if we're concerned about levelling up, and that figure is higher, 40 to 50% of households in the more deprived parts of the city. So if we're really concerned about levelling up, if we're concerned about fairness, as well as about the environment, we need to make sure that we've got a transport strategy that works for everyone. And I think that, you know, the items in packages A and B really, really provide that. Transport is the hardest nuts to crack in terms of carbon emissions. We've got to tackle that, but we've got to make the city fairer for people, and it'll be a more thriving economy as a result, because people will be able to get in and out to do all of the things that they want to do. I'm really excited about the vision that this will underpin. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I'd like to check that I've understood the all of the options in detail under option 15 on page 56 of the WSP report. I want particularly just to clarify that the Eastern Link option, which is option C in there, it's only a small thing, but I'd like to make sure that everybody's understanding what we're talking about when we're talking about that, because that is actually the option that goes forward to be packaged as package E, I think. It says that it would comprise a shorter section of new road to link Rotherwas and the A438 Worcester Road, and I think that should be Ledbury Road. And I'd just like that to be confirmed, because I think that the road number is correct, but the A438 is the road that comes out of Tupsley and goes through Lugwardine.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, it's just to be, for anybody who's reading this, they might think that that option travels further than it does. But I mean, thank you for raising some of those killer stats, Councillor Chowns. I think for me, one of the things that jumped out, and I do like the spider diagrams, the radar plots, because I think it helps to provide an awful lot of information that can be fairly quickly integrated, both with the helpful use of colour and also the way that you've got the quadrants and the axes of the graphics represented. But looking at the road options, all of which we recognise have quite adverse impacts in both the climate emergency quadrant and also the environment quadrants. The measures for both option, the packaging, including option D, which is the Western Relief Road, and option E, which is the link through over the river from Rotherwas to the Ledbury Road, are very similar in terms of all of the quantitative measures that you have looked at in the table that goes with each of those radar plots. Those two options are not hugely dissimilar. In most regards, other than that, the link to the Ledbury Road costs half as much money at 130 million for all of the packages to the package involving the road to the west, which is over 260 million. So to get as close as those quantitative modelled figures seem to show for half the money, I think is quite significant. Now, I recognise also, and thank you for pointing it out in the presentation, that all of the packages that don't involve any road at all factor much more highly in terms of all of the impacts across the four quadrants that are being, the four quadrant themes that are being modelled. But for me, I think there really needs to be a second river crossing for the city in order to give people choice about how they move. So I find quite compelling that the Ledbury Link Road option is so much better value for money in terms of the benefits that it delivers compared to the other road options. So for me, that's the least worst, if you like, of any option involving a road, and by far and away the best value for money. In terms of the way that the options have been grouped into packages, I think everybody who knows Hereford all year round recognises what a very different place it is to travel through during the school holidays. I think we just all know it. So package B, which is looking to sort out the integration of school transport with the elements in package A that deliver safer walking and cycling routes specifically to schools in the city. I think those two options are really important because although they're in separate packages, I think their combination will deliver potentially really significant improvements in helping children to get to school by active travel means without travelling in the car, but also giving parents safer options and hopefully better choices to allow their children to go to school on a bus if they can't go to school walking and cycling, and feel that they're safe doing so. The bus priority elements of package B combining, giving buses priority on the roads, and if looking at the detail of the bus priority option element in the report identifies where it's considered to be important to get some bus priority on the roads at key locations in the city's road network, alongside the potential to introduce reintroduce the hopper bus system that so many people who live in the city remember and have a fondness for. I think those two things together are again really important. I think bringing hopper buses in without finding ways to give buses priorities on the very roads that snarl driving up in a car are critical in order so that people who choose to travel by bus don't end up sitting in the same queues of traffic that they might have done if they carried on travelling in their cars. So making sure that some of these options do come forward together, I think, is really important in the detail that underpins this higher level packaging. And I think for me, again, travelling by bus is an easier behaviour change to make than going from a car to walking or cycling. I come into Hereford from Ledbury, where I live, and we're lucky we've got a really good bus service from Ledbury through to Hereford, which is quite regular and is well used. And it's easy for me to make that choice in bad weather as well as in good. And I think even for shorter journeys in the city, it will be easier for people to make a choice to move from their cars to a bus than, particularly in bad weather, the walking and cycling options, although I hope that walking and cycling is popular with everybody when the weather is clement. It's sometimes difficult, depending on how what your work is, to be able to travel necessarily by those means when it's hammering it down. If your workplace hasn't got the facilities for you to change and shower or whatever when you get to work. So I really like some of the combinations of options that have been packaged up in A and in B, but the way that they've been modelled further on, the package B drops out of some of the higher level package combination modelling that's gone on. So I'd like us to be able to consider maybe a blend of the package options that have been put forward in this study to be able to take advantage of some of the combinations between walking, cycling and bus use that sit across those A and B packages, but are more difficult to see in combination in the later modelling that's shown up in the radar plots. But I think alongside providing choices about how people move in the city, with my finance hat on, I do recognise, as was pointed out in the presentation that we've just had, that the bus option does have some significant revenue costs associated with it in terms of its ongoing operation. So there are some revenue generating options that are part of package C, that particularly to do with how, as a council, we always have recognised that things like car parking charging has had an opportunity to influence behaviour change as alternatives to the use of the car have been brought in over time. And I'd like us to be thoughtful about whether we continue to explore some of those options so that we have some revenue generating options that balance out the costs of operating bus services, enhanced bus services in the city, And those are some of my comments on the evidence that we've got here. But I think it's an excellent piece of work, and I'm particularly grateful to Martin Revel and the team for walking alongside us on this and doing the customer friend role. So that's been really helpful as well in terms of just being devil's advocate on the way through. So I think that's really given us some strong confidence in the information that we've got to make decisions on here. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Interesting that we might look at other packages. I think that was one of the recommendations from the Scrutiny Committee. I was interested, you mentioned a second bridge giving people choice. You didn't go on to talk then about resilience, because I think my concern is, or my issue is that when the new bridge is blocked, there's no other bridge. That bridge does have a limited life, so we do need an alternative. But you didn't go on and talk about that. You talked about choice, and I know how deliberate your words very often are.
Well, if I could come back on that and explain, I mean, coming from a defence background, obviously resilience is something that was bread and butter for me in my working life. But when I was a small child, I lived in Worcester, and anyone who knows Worcester knows that, in terms of the city, there is only one city bridge. And, I do remember as a child, the first thing that my father used to regale us with when he came in from work was how long it had taken him to get over the bridge that night. Worcester has had to put up with only one city bridge for a very, very long time. But anyone who's been looking at the newspapers just recently have seen that there is a plan for a second walking and cycling bridge between the cathedral area and St John's, which is being proposed. And again, I think the city is starting to wake up to the need for more ways to cross their river. And I think in Hereford, that choice is important. Resilience is a point too.
So can I push that one to Martin Brooks? So in the spider diagram and all that lot, I don't see a specific element which relates to resilience. It may be hidden away in one of the figures, one of the descriptions, but it seems that it's a fairly important element for our city to have an alternative when the one bridge is blocked. I wonder, Martin, could you comment on whether that's been taken into account in your research?
I was just making sure that I wasn't muted. Yes, it has been taken into account within the package assessment that we carried out under the economy heading. One of the outcomes we were assessing against was a more resilient transport system, recognising the existence of a single crossing, one sort of major crossing currently. So that has been taken into account. Just as an example, page 124 in the report makes reference to the Eastern Link, which a couple of councillors have referred to. It explicitly says the Eastern Link will provide a new river crossing, giving additional network resilience.
And I suppose with all these things, there's a little bit of subjectivity. So those who are most concerned about resilience would mark perhaps the other options down, which don't contain the roads. So anyway, I think we can argue about spider diagrams until the cows come home. But, I will move on to Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you to everybody who's put in mammoth amount of work to get us to this point. So that's every single officer and every single consultant that's been involved. Thank you for sticking with a really, really difficult subject matter. As well as being a cabinet member, I am a ward member for Saxon Gate, And for those of you who don't know, it sits on the border of the A49 through the Ross Road. And when I went canvassing in the elections, they wanted to talk about the two Bs, Brexit and the bypass. I wish we could have as much interest for some of the social care issues as we do for roads. It's always amazed me. But when we discussed it I spoke to lots of people with opposing views, but there was things that were all in common. And the main things that everybody had in common is that we needed resilience of a second crossing, no matter what it was. And we needed more buses. So not just buses, but affordable buses. So my particular ward on the new estate on Saxon Gate, you can't get the big vehicles through it. There's no possibility. However, those hoppers that people do have fond memories of, and I am one of those people that was a child that used to go on the hoppers and used to get excited, even though they were a god awful yellow and green colour, but you still used to love it because they had a frog on the back. I'm sure I've made up this thing about the frog, but I'm sure it had a frog on the back of the buses. Though when I've been speaking to people on the internet, so I do speak to people on social media, despite the abuse that sometimes we get, I do speak to people and I like to engage in debate, a conversation about what people want. And when we actually get to the crux of it, people want congestion to not be an issue. And the main point is they don't really care how we get there, but we need to get there. And I think what's been sold to a lot of people, and it's through no fault of anybody, I genuinely don't believe that, is that the bypass is the answer to everything. And I think what shows up in the study is that a bypass alone isn't the answer. And that's come through on no matter which option you look at. So I'm really keen that no matter what we do get a second river crossing. I know where my preference is. I think that it should be on the eastern side. The reason being because of the connection between Rotherwas, which is one of our largest areas of economic development. And I also believe that we do need to have affordable, small electric buses that are able to serve our communities. And that's a really key important factor here, is around affordability. If we expect people to get out of their cars, it needs to be affordable and it needs to be regular no matter what we do. And I would personally like to see subsidised amounts for people that are living in our more deprived areas, to encourage them to go on those buses. I need to understand something around the Southern Link Road, so I'll come back to that in a moment. But the other thing that I'm really keen on, and which has come through by talking to people, is around park and rides. And for some reason, whenever you speak to people, they talk about one park and ride. I actually think we need 4. We need a north, a south, an east and a west park and ride, so that people from all directions can come in on a bus that is either put on free or not. So I think that we need to think big around how people get into Hereford. And even if that's a cycle and ride as well, where you can pick up a bike from that point and cycle in. So I think we need to think a bit grand about what plans we're doing. But my question really is around the Southern Link Road. So Martin, I don't know if it's Martin Brooks, I think it probably is, or Steve. I read that there would be an increase in traffic, certainly from a Ross perspective, but also an increase Saxon Gate and Red Hill Way. And obviously that I've got a vested interest in that. So I just wondered if somebody could explain those stats to me.
I can have a go, yes. So it also links into one of the questions that was raised earlier. The Southern Link Road, with the package of active travel measures which was proposed with it, so it's not just the Southern Link Road in isolation. The work that was done historically, because this is not part of this study, but the work that was done historically shows that there is a transfer of traffic between the Belmont Road and Ross Road. And that traffic flows north of the river would change very little, as you'd expect, because it doesn't really affect north of the river. There are also some other effects south of the river in terms of reduction in running traffic through some of the rural roads as people choose to get from Hereford moving south, or coming from the south choosing to get into different parts of Hereford. But the changes in traffic flows on the Southern Link Road alone are relatively modest compared to the changes in traffic flows that would come with a full bypass, or indeed an Eastern Link, or a Eastern River crossing.
Okay, I think that does clarify things for me, because that's what I was trying to understand, because there's been a lot of questions around, if you don't do the bypass, do you still carry on with the Southern Link Road, and is there merit to that? And I think from what you're saying, I've got my answer on that particular question. So thank you for that. That's all the questions I've got, except for to clarify, I'm completely with Councillor Harvey earlier, where she said about perhaps looking at the packages in a slightly different way, because my preferred package actually pulls a few from different areas. So I'd be really interested in that. The other one is, Martin, just on the one which talks about the smart technology on the demand measures. Can you just explain, because there is a significant amount of revenue cost related to that. So can you just explain to me what that means, and for people obviously listening?
Yeah, so the demand management, sorry, it's a question around demand management or the intelligence transport system?
Intelligent transport system.
Okay, so there's a few things that we've included within this, and it's not dissimilar to the point that I made to Councillor Harrington right at the beginning about the way in which packages can be unpicked, you know, and things are scalable and they can be introduced over time. But to refer you to the report, it's page 53 of the report, which indicates a range of things under this intelligence transport system. So it includes technology to reduce delays, so things like an improved scoot system, which coordinates the traffic signals. It includes improved management of car parks, so signage for people as to where to go with spaces being available. It includes also elements for preparing the network for autonomous vehicles coming down the line. You know, they'll be with us before very long, and we need to make sure that the infrastructure that we're putting in place is able to cope with them. It also includes electric vehicle charging points as well, and smart grids to enable electric vehicles to move. So it's a variety of different things. You know, some of them are signage, which will be visible to the travelling public, but some of it is around technology which needs to go on behind the scenes in order to make the network move or behave more smoothly, because it's giving guidance to vehicles as to what to do.
That's really, really helpful, Martin. And I think that does explain the revenue costs associated with it. So thank you for that. I've got no further questions, Leader.
Thank you. Move on then to Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Leader. And yes, just to say, I also hope we can have another look at the packaging and combinations, possible future combinations. So as others have said, thank you very much for a very detailed, very thorough report. Lots of things in it, lots to comment on, and lots of very good stuff here. Focusing on the active travel aspects, as somebody who's been very actively campaigning for many, many years to see Hereford see sustainable travel methods and opportunities in the city, I really welcome much of this. I think many of us are also aware that this sort of packaging could have been implemented literally decades ago. The ideas have been around, the possibilities have been there. We also know that successive governments have insisted that money would not be available for a road until every alternative way of dealing with congestion had been considered and tried, and that never actually did happen, disappointingly. So it's really good to see those things coming through. Greens are often labelled as anti-car, as we know. absolutely not the case. What we want is to see cars where they are necessary, and we have many rural residents who have no alternative. I've been one of them for many years. I just moved back into Leominster last year, but for 25 years I lived in a rural area with very minimal public transport options, and really valued and needed my car. And we know there are many people in even more isolated rural areas who simply couldn't manage without them. But the focus should be on what's appropriate, and a small city and some of our market towns simply isn't necessary. As we've heard, the majority of journeys are very short indeed, often a mile, mile and a half, something of that sort, easily cycled or walked, or if we had a very comprehensive public transport system, buses, and that would also be a much more attractive alternative, I think, for many for many residents. So it's great to see those sort of possibilities, and we know there are enormous benefits to those. It's clear that not only would they help to reduce congestion and the numbers of cars, but it would also be really excellent for our health and well-being. And Mrs. Prothero mentioned the very high levels of obesity, and so to encourage people to walk and cycle and give them safe and attractive opportunities, and that means things like enough road crossings, reduced numbers of cars, of course, trees and all the other things which make a street pleasant and safe and, you know, a positive experience to walk and cycle is what we absolutely want to see. A lot of anxiety comes from businesses and from traders, and I've heard myself both in Hereford and in Leominster people saying, well, if we do these things it will hit trade, and I really do believe it's completely the opposite is the case. There are many reports and reviews which clearly show that if you pedestrianise, if you make a place attractive for people to walk and cycle, trading improves, business benefits. There really is so much evidence of that effect that we need to, you know, we really need to reassure people on that. And as a council, we're absolutely behind small and large businesses, local economy. We really want to support it and give it every type of help and support that we can. So I do believe that these measures will really help in that respect. School transport's been touched on, and it's very important. We know that. We know that, as has been said already, when school is out, travel is much easier, and we really don't have the same sort of snarl ups and congestion that we have when school is in. And of course, we know there are ways to do that. We should be encouraging far more children, or in fact all children, to be either on buses or to be walking or cycling. And again, parents will be happier for that to happen if the roads are actually safe. What stops parents encouraging their children to walk and cycle is uncertainty. You know, if you've got cars on the road and all the rest of it, understandably, parents are anxious and nervous about that. So we need to make sure that it's a positive experience and that parents can be reassured and happy about their children walking and cycling. And again, it'll be good for their health and their well-being. So I really hope we can move towards that. And of course, cleaner air and all the other aspects for health would be benefited. A couple of things finally. We've mentioned absolutely climate emergency. Climate emergency has recently been declared, but let's not forget this has been an issue for decades. And, you know, I think many of us, perhaps most of us here, have been aware of that for a very long time. It's got worse, it's become high profile, but it's always been there. And thank goodness we're now recognising it and trying to address it. So that is an absolutely fundamental part of what we could and should be doing. And COVID has been mentioned, absolutely. Lots of uncertainties about what people will do in the future, but I think it's pretty clear that a lot of people will continue to work from home, will certainly part-time, maybe not every day, but certainly part-time. So this will surely have an impact and will change the picture of how people travel. So I think that's something we really need to bear in mind. But final point really to make is that I understand the need for a crossing, a river crossing. I absolutely see the point of it, the resilience it would build in and so on. But I am extremely uneasy about where this could take us. And as somebody who would be totally opposed to the idea of an eastern bypass, if we were to decide not to go the western route, I am very uneasy about where this could imply some alternative bypass. So I have real concerns about that, while at the same time recognising the value of having a crossing. So it's finding a way to sort of achieve that without, you know, commitments to anything beyond what that particular move, which I can see does make some sense. So a lot to say there, but thank you very much for listening, and thank you again for the report.
Okay, so I have 3 more requests to speak from the Cabinet. We'll then deal with the question from the public, and then we'll have a break. So first of all, Councillor Jimman.
Thank you very much, Leader. A comment and then a question. The comment is that, as you're well aware, the ward that I have is 10-12 miles south of the city and extending to 24 miles south. Access to the city is vital for everybody in this area, and everything is north of the river virtually. In other words, well, I will say even in life, that's true, but even when you're dead, because the crematorium is north of the river as well. So in order to get in and to go to the theatre and indulge in anything related to shopping of any serious nature, one has to get across the river. Resilience, I'm so pleased you mentioned that, because I think that's absolutely vital. And we have seen in the past with the floods, and indeed when there was a terrorist issue in the past, that what happens to one bridge, and indeed the difficulties we had with getting the ambulance out and across and through. Thank heavens we have our retained firefighters in this part of the world, in US Harold and Peterchurch, do an absolutely excellent job. My question to the Martin twins, the issue of on the package comparison on page 212 or 92 of your report, everybody lives in a click and collect society now and wants instant results. I noticed the timelines of your packages, and they terms, for example, most elements could be delivered in 3 years, When you get further along, you say most elements could be delivered in less than 4 years. But when you come to the particulars of any form of roads, you do make the point it would take up to 10 years. Now, can you, for those who are watching, listening, thinking about this, explain why in China you can build a hospital in a week, but it's going to take us 10 years to build something of this nature? Can you just explain why that takes that long? Because it's going to sound to those who've been patiently waiting for a long time for something, an extraordinary length of time.
Sure. I suppose there are 3 main elements to constructing a road. One is that you've actually got to plan it and design it and agree on what it is you want to do. The second element is the democratic process that sort of has to be gone through. And the third is you actually need to construct the road in question. So the 10 years was put in the report as an estimate, but the Eastern Link, the Eastern River crossing, or indeed the Western bypass to a degree, but certainly the 2 Eastern options, they have not been designed to any sensible degree. There are some old alignments which were used as the basis for the work that we've done, but in no way is that of sufficient detail to understand exactly where it would go, what it would look like, exactly what it would cost, all those sorts of issues. The second point is we know roads are contentious, as we saw with the Western bypass historically, that there are processes that have to be gone through in terms of a planning process. It may be possible to revert to central government to make a decision, or it's done through the Town and Country Planning Act, which opens up the opportunity for public inquiries. All those add time. because there will undoubtedly be objections to any road scheme that is put forward. And then you've got the construction of the scheme as well. So you need to go through the procurement exercise, and then somebody needs to get on site and then actually build it. Wrapping those three elements together, I think 10 years is it's a round enough number to be working with.
Thank you. That's a very
Martin Rebel, do you want to just comment very briefly? I'm sure you agree.
I've got nothing really to add to what Martin said, to be honest. He's given you a fairly comprehensive answer there.
Yeah.
You know, that democratic process bit is the bit. I mean, you probably put a reasonable number on the plan, design, and construct, but the democratic process bit is very difficult to predict exactly how long that's going to take, and therefore I think what Martin said is a pretty good answer.
Okay, thank you, Martin. I'll move then to Councillor Tyler.
Sorry, Leader, I couldn't unmute my button then. Yes, a lot of comments have been said by other cabinet members, but I live on the Alson Hill ward, so my residence when I was going through my campaign was on about bypass and how the congestion is through when we're back at school, and how traffic gets through the city. The issues that I would like to raise as a comment really is that we really do need school transport for our young people and families to make sure they are secure, and families can put their children on the bus, get them A to B to school and back. And so they are able to perhaps car share with other people who are going to work. But from COVID changes now, people will travel differently. But that is my major concern, that if we're going to make a change in this, in the way we drive around the city and how we get our children to school, we have actively got to change their habits and help them make these choices. So that'd be a cheaper bus service, a secure bus service. And so that will hopefully help us in that delivery of moving that 1 mile across the city going to school. Because we all know it, once it is half term, the traffic is reduced significantly. So we always see that. We always say, why is it slower when they're at school, but it's really quick when they're out of school. So that's another important point. Another issue I'd like to bring up is that our bridge is nearly 60 years old. There are issues with it. We need to make sure that we have got a substantial crossing in Herefordshire, because if anything did happen, it would cause absolute chaos in Hereford. So we do need to consider another river bridge crossing, and all behind that options we're putting forward. So those are my real comments really, but I really want to see Hereford City safer. So while cyclists can be safer on our roads and our pedestrians can be safer, because there are small incidents around the city centre, not just pedestrians and cyclists, because of people don't see them or they are busy rushing around. So I'd like to see other changes in terms of reduction in speed as well around the city centre, which Councillor Harrington is fully aware of my concerns of that as well. So thank you, Leader. That's my points across.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler. Councillor Crockett.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you very much, everybody involved in this comprehensive presentation and analysis of this massive project. I'm a Queenswood ward member, and that is on the northern end of this proposed Western bypass. I've never seen any absolute concrete evidence to support a Western bypass or Southern Link Road, and I still don't. As mentioned earlier today in one of the questions from a member of the public, the SLR will shift traffic from one A road to another, then ultimately attempting to join back onto the A49 and over the ageing Greyfriars Bridge. We need another bridge, and I think preferably eastern. We need better links to the growing Rotherhurst Enterprise Zone. We need better walking and cycling routes into the city. These can be achieved really quite quickly. We need out of town parking, and that is park and choose. And we need a better traffic light system on the A49 to allow movement of vehicles, not gridlock in the rush hours. Therefore, I feel a combination of A, B, part of C and parts of E would be beneficial to the residents of this county and city and encourage healthier options from commuting around the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crockett. So finally, Sarah, are you able to put up the question which was asked by a member of the public?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So the question was, can WSP confirm that all the percentages on journey time savings that were referenced for vehicles are on average less than 5 minutes, and that many of these journey time savings can be achieved more simply and cheaply by implementing sustainable transport measures? So Martin, this is one I think for you, if you don't mind.
Yes. The percentage on journey times, the savings are on average less than 5 minutes. I think that probably is right. Given that most of the journeys are relatively short, then the savings will be relatively small for individual journeys. So I think arithmetically that's correct. It goes on to say whether many of those journey time savings can be achieved more simply and cheaply by implementing sustainable transport measures. I mean, the report does cover that there are savings to be achieved by journey time savings to be achieved by all packages for some of the key corridors that we looked at within the study. But the report does indicate that the degree of those savings is different when comparing the different packages. So I don't, the many of these journey time savings can be achieved more simply. It would depend on which journey times we're talking about to be able to respond to that adequately, I think. I see the earlier part of this question is talking about north-south journey times, but again, I'm not really sure which section of north-south that's referring to, because that wasn't in the original question. So
I'll leave the question there, and if Councillor Harrington thinks that a bit more detailed response would be appropriate, so I'll leave it for him to liaise with you, Martin, to do that.
I'm more than happy to do that. We've certainly got the information. I just need to be clear on exactly what the question is that's being asked.
Yeah, we can do that. Thank you.
So we're going to have a break now. I suggest we come back at 5:15, so that'll be 17:15, so 8 minutes, time for the kettle to boil. And we'll all come back then. So I think, does the lady say something? Okay, thank you all very much. I'm sorry this is going on so long, but I think this is such an important topic that I think it's worth spending time on it. So it's now views of group leaders, and I'm planning to go first of all to Councillor Matthews and then Councillor Lester. So that just gives you a little bit of notice to Lester. So Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Leader. I've got a mouthful of biscuit and dropping me right in the deep end. First of all, colleagues, I would like to confirm that myself and my colleagues strongly support package A plus C plus E. We feel that the proposals contained in that package would do most to enhance the local economy and clearly has the highest value for money. It also includes an Eastern River Bridge together with a link to the A438 bridge, together with a link to the A438 Ledby Road, which I, more than anyone else, have been fighting for tirelessly for the past 18 plus years. including having numerous heated public meetings with the previous administration and our 2 local MPs. It's always been quite clear, Leader, to me, that is what our local businessmen, emergency services, and the large majority of the public support. Plus every administration, except the last, of whatever political persuasion, have always supported for the past 40 years that route across the city. Plus the fact, which hasn't been mentioned, the A49 from Hereford to Ross should be urgently upgraded, and the Highways Agency are grossly failing us. The report, Leader, refers to 4 overarching transport objectives. Now, the economy, as you know, the economy is dear to my heart. Creating a resilient transport system which allows reliable and efficient movement of people and goods, which supports sustainable development and a thriving local economy. That's vital. With so many people losing their jobs and businesses struggling, we must do everything possible to support our local economy and deliver the desperately needed jobs. Coming to the end, Leader, we feel that package above mentioned is by far the best to deliver the recommendations and at the same time reduce CO2 emissions. Delivering park and ride and other measures which have been mentioned would reduce traffic within the city, which is vital. It's also essential that the eastern route is continued at some time, probably further onto the A49, but that's something for another day. I thank my colleagues, Councillor Crockett, my parish councillors and Anthony Powers, who have spent many years and many hours of our time trying to satisfactorily resolve this controversial issue. And it's affected us more because it's right through the middle of our ward. And we didn't object to it because of the principle of doing so. We objected to it because the western route was wrong for the economy. I therefore feel that a package A plus C plus E is the way forward for this county. After all, it doesn't matter what mode of transportation is in place in the next few years. We will still require appropriate highways for them to move. A lot of what I've heard said concerns me greatly, Leader. If we don't get things moving, we're going to be in a serious situation. And some of the delays the consultants talk about, well, to me, it just doesn't bother to mention it. The job could be done in a fraction of the time if the right will is there. And I would also like to just mention to Councillor Arrington, if I could, the impact on assessing routes other than the river crossings, in particular the Bridge Sollers crossing. We'd have a route both sides of the county then. And as Councillor Ginman knows, with the Pontrilas sawmills and many others, traffic coming to the market, that would take a tremendous lot of traffic, essential traffic, off the city. And where he says work is done and outside of the Hereford transport network, well, you know, carrying out schemes like that, just merely upgrading a road that's already there, Councillor Harrington, would have a gross impact on the lessening the volume of traffic within the city. Thank you very much. I might want a brief comment later on. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. I think I'll move on straight on to Councillor Lester.
Thank you, Councillor Hitchener. Just like to express the views of the Conservative group, but in response to your point, Councillor Hitchener, about the last election, with respect, I would disagree. I would say it was more about Brexit than it ever was about a bypass. And I would say for the council, not only the Conservatives, but for the council, the environment has always been a major concern. And it's absolutely of vital importance because we want a great place to live and we want to look after it for future generations. So that is at the heart of, I think, everything the council has done historically and will continue to do so. There have been comments made about COVID, and whilst we're in the desperate midst of trying to deal with a very, very difficult situation, and it's having a huge impact on everything throughout the world, let alone the county and the country. I do not believe that COVID will be with us forever. We've had pandemics in the past, and it will take a huge amount of effort and resource to overcome such problems. But we have to be planning for the long term, and I think that COVID is in the mix at the moment. But in terms of the future and talking in generations' time, I don't think we should overplay its significance when we're looking at the very long term. So I would agree that all councillors are debating this issue, and the cabinet's debating this issue, because all councillors, I believe, and I fundamentally believe this, all councillors are trying to make the best decision for Herefordshire. And I do believe also that the next election will determine whether or not this administration has judged it right about the transport package. But I think that it isn't about doing what's most popular. I would agree with Councillor Harrington's assessment of that. But I think it's about doing what is absolutely right, and in particular, right for Herefordshire's growth. I have to make the point on behalf of my team that it is a bit galling to have spent nearly £500,000 on finding out that the best way to deal with congestion and provide resilience for the transport network is to build a western bypass. We knew that all along, and we could have told you that and it not cost a penny, but it is a real concern to us that so much money has been made just to come to the same conclusion. And on that vein, the report also concludes that a package should be considered that doesn't include the eastern route. Now, again, many reports and much resource has been spent on dealing with the issue about whether the east is the best way to go, and they've consistently come back to the same conclusion. Spending all this money has not altered that conclusion. And so again, it's very disappointing and frustrating from our point of view that when you put more money into the equation, you still come out with the same answer. In response to Councillor Harvey's point, she's absolutely right. It is about unlocking the options and providing choice of movement, but you have to choose the right option that unlocks the most potential in achieving the other aims. And obviously the Western Bypass is the one that achieves the aims in terms of growth and development. There is the need to focus on buses, absolutely, and to increase the modes of transport is the right way to go. But most people do not have the luxury of the time to spend their time using buses. 2/3 of the population live outside of Hereford, and if they are to access those vital services that Councillor Ginman quite eloquently points out, we have to accept that the car will remain a key mode of transport, and it's how we cope with that reality that is really the issue. The Cabinet passed their own delivery plan, 2020-2022, and it's a point I made at the last Cabinet meeting. Page 5, the aspiration is creating a modern and resilient transport network within the city and county. Now, page 214 of this council document that we're discussing today and the report, it says on there, the package, which includes the Western Bypass, is forecast to provide greatest congestion relief to the city and the greatest resilience for the transport network, with the strategic link over the River Wye. So that we've paid all of this money to come to that critical conclusion. There's the answer that you've got. And so this, again, is a very frustrating point, but the answer is in the report that you have commissioned. The report does say that option A is the best value for money. With the greatest of respect to the officers compiling the report, I think this is an utter fiction. And I think it's because of the way the report has been ring-fenced into discarding the obvious, is that if you create more growth, you have more land to create more houses and more jobs, then that will be the best value for money, because the greater return to the economy is obvious, and it will continue to be that way for future generations to go on and on and on. So I would stress that value for money, you may want to look at it in one way, but if you look at the overall economic benefits, you can only come to one conclusion. We've mentioned some killer stats, not my phrase, but I think it's important to mention some statistics. 59% of the traffic, the overwhelming majority, 59% of the traffic is either trying to get in, trying to get out, or through the city. And so that is a key indicator in knowing what the issue is and what you're dealing with. And on page 146 of the report, it highlights the traffic going across the Greyfriars Bridge, and over a decade, it consistently points that the average daily trips is something between 45,000 and 47,000 trips a day. That's the issue you're dealing with in Greyfriars Bridge, one bridge crossing. So if you're looking for another bridge crossing, you go with the only viable option that's going to give you the growth and the housing, and it's the Western Bypass. We do have we are very concerned about this idea about taxing businesses for their employees to park in the city. We think that this will harm them. The other thing is, it's the affordability of any package that that the Cabinet chooses. You can worry about the capital costs of any project, but for the council, if they rely on the grants from government, the real key issue is going to be the revenue implications. Can the council sustain the revenue cost of any of these projects over the long term? And it's a stark situation. In order to pay for increased revenue costs, you have to do two things. One of two things. You either have to save by making cuts, or you have to increase the council tax burden and put the council taxpayer, get them to pay for it. And so in the options that are being put forward, you have to look at the affordability of doing it. We are absolutely in favour of providing other options, active travel measures. It's a shame that it hasn't been focused about the point that the Hereford transport package that my team were proposing had all of the ideas to put forward more space for buses and cycling and what have you, but it was predicated on the point that you make the space for it by detrunking the A49 and allowing that movement of travel, because there is a diversion going on. We are also skeptical about this idea that it would take 10 years to do anything. I agree with Councillor Matthews on this issue. It's a matter of a political will to get these things done in the shorter term. And we make the plea that if you ask most people about their view on a Western bypass, they will tell you just get on and build it. So thank you for that opportunity to express our views. And I would also like to focus on some of the scrutiny points that were made, but I will come back to that when, Chair, you allow that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lester. We've gone on for 3 hours. Are we happy to carry on, or do you want to stop? I presume the Cabinet happy to keep going? Yes, thank you. Good. Now, the next is Councillor Lester. Councillor Selden.
Thank you, Leader. Let's first of all look at just to pick up one of the last things Councillor Lester said. I was part of the planning committee in 2016 that passed the route for the Southern Ring Road as far as planning was concerned. Now, by my calculations, that road should very nearly be ready to be opened, and not a sod has been turned. So let's not start looking at the timescales, please, and why things haven't happened, because I think all administrations prior to this one have been to blame for not getting on and sorting this out. But as far as IOC is concerned, that is the main thing. I take the 10-year road building as actually perhaps a conservative estimate as to get some of the road schemes through. So what we think we should be doing is addressing what needs to be done now. We've lived with congestion I think we agree that congestion in Hereford's a problem. I think we also agree that another river crossing is necessary to provide that resilience, and that's a word that's crept up several times this evening. So let's have a second river crossing, probably the eastern side. Let's get on with it and do it. Now, home to school transport has also been mentioned several times, and that's come from every single member, I think, of my group, that they recognise that when the schools aren't in session, travelling across the city is much, much easier. Now, there has to be a reason for that, and I think the reason for that is that the parents aren't out and about. No, we must be able to do something about that. The Asda roundabout also figures quite highly in some of our members' thoughts, and it's a bit unfortunate that there isn't a representative of Highways England with us today, because I think they have a key part to play in planning anything as we go forward. So in summary, Leader, IOC believes that we need to get on and do this and not delay any further. Let's implement the easy wins. Let's implement the bus signage, the bus replacement, reinstate the hoppers. These don't have to take forever. Let's get on and do the quick wins, then see what we can do if the congestion still persists at the level that it is at the moment. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Selden. Councillor Tommy B.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'll try and be brief. Yeah, so as a Green Group, transport is obviously one of our central concerns, and we've been, like as all councillors, we've been listening to local people's views for a very long time on it. And whatever people's views on road schemes, everyone, as we know, agrees. Everyone wants to reduce congestion, improve air quality, increase mobility, protect the countryside, encourage active travel, and decrease social isolation. So we really welcome this review. It's great to have a proper look at all options. That was something that was well overdue, and it's really refreshing to have a cabinet who was determined to look at all options afresh. We know that decisions must be evidence-based, so it's really good that this review went back to first principles. As colleagues have said, we might not have packaged the options in exactly this way, but as a cabinet, you're free to package them how you want and decide how you want. I agree with you, Leader, that the timing is significant, the timing of this review, because of COVID, and it was good to have that acknowledged in the presentation. People are thinking more than ever about what they really value, about their quality of life, rethinking commuting, working from home, valuing more than ever access to the countryside. And these are all things that we must bear in mind when we think about value, social value and value for money. And the transport decisions we make now will have huge repercussions on every aspect of our lives here in Herefordshire. As Greens, we believe that building new roads should be the last resort, not the first resort. And as Councillor Norman said earlier, a lot of time has been wasted over the past few years when we could have been making progress with walking and cycling, bus services, and sorting out school transport. And planning new roads without tackling these things really doesn't make sense. As far as buses are concerned, we're at one with Councillor Davis. Decent, affordable, reliable buses will transform people's lives, especially people who don't have access to private transport. And we as a council have a duty under the equality duty to support our most vulnerable residents, and buses is one of the best ways of doing that. It's extremely frustrating that there are legislative challenges to producing local bus services, and we hope that the government will change its tune and support local councils to develop bus services. So we support all the measures to get on with active transport, active travel, public transport and school transport. And we support the cancellation of the Western Relief Road. Some of the assumptions around the debate around the Western Relief Road, some of the assumptions about bypasses and growth and housing are, in our opinion, simplistic and outdated. We're open to exploring an Eastern River crossing, in particular for reasons of resilience, and we'll be keeping a close eye on what sort of designs are proposed and on the tendering process from the ecological point of view, quality of life point of view, and as well as for the reasons outlined by Councillor Norman. So it's been interesting to see the various stages of this review, and the process has been as interesting as the outcome. And it's so important that we have local, flexible, place-based solutions that are right for us. I think we've all had enough of central model forecasts and central government impositions and constraints. We must do all we can to make decisions that are right for Herefordshire and create transport systems that will encourage business, encourage tourism, enhance our quality of life, and something that in 10 years we can all be really proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toynbee. Now, Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you, Leader. Right, I've been a ward councillor for 9.5 years now. Stood as a Hereford independent. Obviously, for the first 8 years was a member of the opposition. It's been a long-held belief of the Hereford independents to provide a reduction to the continued congestion within our city. And that was one of the promises I made, when I became a councillor. It was very clear from all the information provided that the Southern Link Road and the Western Bypass would not help in any meaningful way. Even at public consultation events, the advisors clearly stated that a Western Bypass would not lessen congestion. And they even at one point admitted that it would get worse before it even returned back to the same level. All this over a period of 10 years of continued congestion. Therefore, the Hereford Independent Group believe the best way forward is to take immediate measures to improve walking and cycling and the provision of buses, and also for resilience, provide an eastern bridge and road to the Ledbury A438 road. This would provide improved access to the enterprise zone on Rotherwas, improve the link between further education facilities in Rotherwas, and with the announcement that the university is starting up in March, that's a very important link. It would also provide improved access to our hospital that's already been mentioned, and the fire service and the police. As the ward councillor for the Backbury ward, which obviously takes in Hampton Bishop, this would also lower the rat run through Hampton Bishop, Morderford and Home Lacey, which is locally classed as the eastern bypass of Hereford currently. Hopefully with the current coalition administration, we now have the ability to move the necessary measures forward without further delay for the betterment of the extremely important businesses of our county, but also our community as a whole. And I would like on behalf of the Hereford Independents to recommend A, B and C plus E as the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hardwick. Councillor James.
Thank you, Leader. I shall be fairly brief. I endorse what Councillor Lester said earlier about the situation. The one thing that is quite clear is that the majority of the people in Hereford City want a bypass. There is no doubt about that. And they are very, very angry about that. You know, they have wanted this for years, and this is now going to be denied them for another even more years now. As to the idea that the Herefordshire Independence, going on the east side of the river, well, be careful what you wish for, because that would be across the Lug Meadows. Councillor Norman wouldn't be very happy with that. So you're ruling out a bypass. The public are very, very angry. We saw that what happened with the COVID proposals that this council introduced earlier in the year. The shambles that became. If we're not careful, this will be also a shambles. And it's not going to improve dramatically the traffic situation in Hereford City. People are concerned about it. The idea of bus priorities. Yes, there are an odd one or two places where you can do that, but because of the, you know, Hereford is an old city with relatively little room to produce the sort of things you could do if you were designing a new city or town. So the park and ride, the problem we have is with the population, we have so many feeder roads coming into Hereford without a ring road, as where it usually works rather well in places like Shrewsbury, where you would have to build so many park and rides, and in order to provide the service that make park and rides viable, you have to have really regular bus services from those particular sites, and that is enormously expensive. Shrewsbury have to subsidise theirs, even with them there only being 2 park and ride sites. Would cost them an enormous sum of money per year. So this will go on, and we shall see in 2 years' time what the public actually think.
Thank you, Councillor James. And I go back to Councillor Lester in his capacity as Chair of the General Scrutiny Committee.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would just like to, on behalf of the Scrutiny Committee, thank them for their efforts. They too had a marathon meeting, and I do thank them for their stamina. The committee was made up of people from all walks of life, and so I think the report was approached from different perspectives, which I think was a very good thing. I mean, one question we have, I think, is whether or not they were given enough time to fully consider the issues and do the report the justice it deserved. We would like to thank the officers for their forbearance at the meeting, and I know that Mr. Revel and Mr. Brooks did their very best to answer all the questions we had, as they have done so today, so thank you to them. So after a very, very long meeting, you're not surprised to note that there were 13 recommendations. So if I just recap, please. Recommendations A, D, right, so recommendation A, which was traffic lights. B, reassessing the weighting of the options. D, a river crossing. E, the county-wide impact. E, the Eastern bypass, and H was the schools issue, and J was the bridge solids issue. All of those recommendations are saying, have you got enough information before you to make your judgments? And does further work need to be done? And I think that was a very valid question that the Scrutiny Committee brought forward as a recommendation. Now, with the greatest of respect to your debate today, I would ask Cabinet to consider whether they've given those that thought to getting further information. The issue about recommendation F, which I think is a really good point that the scrutiny meeting hammered out, was that you know, it's the cabinet's choice to whether they go along with the choices or whether they desire to repackage the options before them. And again, has the cabinet really thought about that point? The other, there was a recommendation about carbon offsetting. Has that really been considered within the report? The recommendation K actually came out with saying you should cancel the Western Bypass. So the committee, although it wasn't a unanimous decision, we're really trying to make things helpful for the cabinet to come to a swift deliberation. But lastly, the recommendation L was about, you know, whether or not there was the robustness of the report and whether that needs challenging. So please, in your deliberations, bear in mind all of those recommendations that the scrutiny committee laboured over quite a long time. And obviously, it may or may not change your views on the way you want to go. But I would just ask for the benefit of scrutiny on their behalf to just have those recommendations in mind when you come to your deliberations. Thank you, Chair.
Right, so the next step is to go to the Cabinet to respond to comments made by group leaders.
Leader, could I have a very brief comment, please? Very brief.
Well, the problem always is that if I allow you to have a brief comment, then I got to allow else.
Let's be honest, that Cabinet's had plenty of time, you know. All I was going to say is just to give the example of the thinking of the public, leader. You'll know, because you worked with me at the last election, the independents with their policies, which Councillor Hardwick and I've put forward, we picked up 12 seats. The public thought what we were saying and doing was right. That should be listened to. And may I also say to the present administration, through my hard work and leadership and recruitment skills, you are where you are. Make sure you take every opportunity and get something done. Perhaps you want to go another couple of years.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Matthews. I'll use the opportunity to comment on Councillor Lester's observation about that, because I said in my introduction that the road was a significant issue. I did not say it was the one. That Brexit was an issue. The incompetence of central government of the Conservative Party was another one. I think there was a revolt against established parties, which gave us a fantastic tone. But that's kind of another debate, I suppose. Not say.
Can I come back on that, seeing as Councillor Matthews has had an opportunity to?
Here we go. I think Councillor, someone wants me to be fair. Mr. Harrington, Councillor Harrington,
I think it's only fair that Councillor Lester does come back. If we're having,
well, can I just say, Councillor Lester, I did not say the bypass was the issue. I said it was a significant. And if you're saying it was not a significant issue, well, I'd be very surprised.
Well, I think the point is that the party that got the most seats were the Conservatives, but I'll end it there. But I would just finish by saying that you know, I've had the opportunity during this meeting to make all of the points that the Conservatives wanted to make, and I thank you for that opportunity.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, so we now move on. I think perhaps a shortish discussion, hopefully by the Cabinet, and then we'll move on to a recommendation. See how we get on. Councillor Harrington.
Yes, thank you all, and thank you for your views and thoughts, scrutiny. They have been very useful, and I have looked at them, and we have given them some thought. And I don't know quite if we're going to discuss them all in the room today, because it's been a very long session. I had hoped we would go through them. Essentially, you know, we were happy to look at almost all of the recommendations. Some of them were not practical, as Councillor S pointed out, to be done in the time that was available. And at some point, as he knows well, you've just got to get on with things. We have had a very, as he said, expensive and in-depth report done, but that does not preclude us from looking at other aspects and other issues that have been raised by scrutiny. I don't know if I should just briefly touch on some of them. I will run through them briefly, actually.
I think that would be a good idea too, if you would do that.
Yeah. So one of the recommendations, I think recommendation A, was around the traffic lights. I'm very keen to understand, you know, this in greater detail. We know, obviously it's anecdotally, but we know when traffic lights fail, we get a very smooth movement. And the counterpoint to that is how long will that last for without, you know, the lights being put back on, or some other measures. I think that's what we have to look into. I don't think we've done that properly, and I don't think this study attempted to in a way. It did some early work, it didn't do specific work. It also did say that it hadn't looked at junctions outside of the A49, so that I'm sure there are other places in Hereford where we can do that, to a greater extent, much more quickly. But I think the traffic light removal or returning you know, many junctions back to roundabouts is something that's really something we can look at. The weighting issue, I've considered that. I mean, in a way, we are weighting it as a cabinet. You know, there are indicators, there are indexes in there that we are weighting it by. I'm not sure that we can, in the time available, break it down, you know, or perhaps need to break it down any further. But we have essentially weighted and will weight, you know, our decisions in that way. Park and choose, I completely agree that park and choose is a great option, and not in a grand scheme. The thing I think one of the things that may have been, perhaps, you know, without being unkind to the previous administration, who did take 12 years to not get very far, if I am being unkind, having said I wouldn't be unkind, and to be waiting another 10 years to get a Western bypass. You know, that's 22 years to deliver something that maybe if we'd used a bit more, if we'd used a bit more nous and used other options and thought about things in parallel, we might have got a bit further. I think park and choose is a very important option, and not in the same sense of big park and rides like you get in places like Oxford, but just small farmers' fields. We have many approaches to Hereford where a farmer would give us a field, rent us a field, and for the sake of whatever deal that he does, we might have 40, 50, 100 vehicles. I think that's you know, infinitely possible. So I'd like to look at that. Recommendation around, let's have a look, sorry.
River bus services, recommendation D.
Yeah. But bus services, recommendation D. I don't think that's one for us to drive, to be perfectly honest. And I've enjoyed all the sort of humorous social media stories on this. It wasn't actually a council idea, it was a scrutiny recommendation. We were happy to look at it because, in a way, if a community group, or perhaps if some businesses along there like the Left Bank and the Parish Council at Belmont and the Scouts get together and come up with a plan, I don't see why we can't support that. You know, whether it's for tourism, whether it's getting people, you know, half down the river. It wouldn't get them very far. You might go from the top of Belmont all the way down to perhaps the Vicky Bridge, and that might make, for a lot of people, make a big difference to their journey and allow them then to cycle or walk the rest of the way. Recommendation E, what was that in relation to? Let's have a look.
County-wide transport challenges.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think, in a way, I think it's been unfair to say that we don't look at the county-wide, because I think some of the stats have showed how much traffic, you know, comes in or around. As we said, we've got about 40% of traffic in Hereford, which is intra-city, so it doesn't leave the city centre, which is unusually high. It's much higher than other authorities. And we've got about another 50% or 53% that either has an origin or destination in the city to just outside the surround, so younger, inwards, outwards, etc. And I think that looking at ways of, you know, making improvements to you know, the wider, making improvements to the system in Hereford would actually help the wider transport infrastructure. But I think in terms of, I think buses would probably address this the most, and that's where I'd put that. I'm going to take Councillor Matthews' point, and that's something, you know, that we could look at. It sort of matches together, so I won't mention that one again. I mean, there may be some people who are not very happy about that idea, but it is something that should be considered. Carbon offsetting. We haven't. I don't think carbon trading for infrastructure, pieces of infrastructure like roads, is at the moment something that's done. But that's not to say it might not be done. I know that Councillor Chowles will be looking at carbon offsetting, you know, in the next stages of development of the carbon management plan, and we could see if there's any sort of you know, correlation to transport and carbon trading on transport. But once again, that's not something that's going to be done quickly, and I can't give an assurance when we are, you know, wanting to to get on with something, when there are other alternatives there that actually do not cost the environment. You know, it's interesting to hear Councillor Lester saying that the greatest resilience is shown by Western Bypass, the greatest congestion relief. But as I said before, these are metrics that are made on assumptions, and actually the eastern crossing rivers, the eastern river crossings show, you know, not very far off in the same terms of congestion relief, but actually they don't cost £250 million. And that's another thing that's extraordinary, is that I don't think anyone's measured the cost or really thought about the cost of a Western Bypass compared to the other options. I mean, they're astronomical, and I would say undeliverable. And in actual fact, when we had our core strategy examination in 2015, the inspector actually said, I will not consider the deliverability of houses for strategic parts of Hereford on the basis of your Western Bypass, because I don't think it's deliverable, but you can leave it in there. So that probably should have been a bit of a warning to us. And I do actually genuinely like my ward members on the opposite side of the Zoom, but I just think perhaps they focused too narrowly on one particular issue and didn't have the scope and the comprehensive approach to things. Sorry, I wandered there a bit.
Yeah, you're on to J, which is river crossing and bridge dollars.
Yeah, we've done that. The executive ban and the Western Bypass, I mean, that's going to be part of the considerations. It's obviously going to be part of the considerations. The executives look at the robustness of the qualitative assessment they have presented. I think the whole point of getting a critical friend in, which we did, means that we've satisfied that to, as best as we can in the circumstances, once again, without going through yet another review, as Councillor Lester and others have said, which the public probably will not stomach. And I think we've come to the end of the road on that one. Recommendation M, I can't read it because your head's in the way, David, on my screen.
Okay, Hereford Council to immediately implement a well-designed, comprehensive, safe and attractive network of active traffic measures across the entire county to reduce change and risk of service.
I mean, that's a good ambition, and we can't do it immediately across the entire county, but we certainly, that's one of the beauties of everything in package A, is that we can, the policy already exists, and we can do as much as we can, as quickly as we can, and we have, we've got the transport hub soon to get up and running. We've got the St. Owen's contraflow going in, so that is a focus. And I think what the review has shown very clearly is that packages A and B suit Hereford so much. Package A, we are such a small city, so many people travel such short distances. Over 50% of people in Hereford city travel less than 1.2 miles a day to go to work or to go to school, and that is just something we must change. And it does come down to things like political ambition, political direction, and also putting money into it. And there are revenue costs associated to things like buses and to putting in infrastructure like this. But in terms of that, I mean, once again, I go back to the cost associated with the Western Bypass. Not only is it a decade away, but for 250 million, we could buy 100 electric buses for £30 million, and we could run them free of charge for the next 20 years across the entire county and still be quids in. And these are the kind of figures and facts that worry me, let alone that the fact it's the most damaging environmentally. And our Conservative colleagues signed us up to, climate emergency, and many of my, I know many of them have, a huge amount of desire to protect the environment. I work with them daily on that basis, and yet this contradiction, when they look at certain elements and think, well, it doesn't matter in that respect, or perhaps they mitigate it in some other way. I find that extraordinary sometimes. Right, I'm misusing this opportunity, I think, to make.
So I think you counted through the scrutiny. So
I think the point I'm making is that I will look at all of these, because some of them are very good. Some of them may not be achieved in the short term, but I don't see why we shouldn't look at them. But I don't want it to delay.
I think we're quite close to agreeing something on the recommendations, but I've got Councillor Chowns and then Councillor Davis.
I'll be brief. I just wanted to respond to a couple of factual inaccuracies in the contributions from Councillor Lester and Councillor James, and just ensure that we had clarity on that, assist them with clarification and anyone watching. So I think both of them said most people want to bypass, but actually, according to the stakeholder analysis in this report, which was the most recent and comprehensive analysis of this, the top preference shown on page 138 of the pack is invest in bus network, electric buses and reduce fares. So it's very clear that actually the most popular options and other popular options included a new river crossing, also included investment in cycling and walking. So I think we just need to be really clear about what people do actually want and not make unsupported claims. The second issue kind of leads on from that, because I believe that what the majority of people want is a reduction in congestion. They don't want a bypass per se, they want a reduction in congestion. And I think we can all agree on that. But let's talk about what it costs to achieve that reduction in congestion. And again, I think the way that Councillor Lester presented this was somewhat misleading. For £57 million, we can get the same amount of congestion reduction, the Western bypass costing £200 million, ballpark. So it is much, much, much cheaper to get congestion reduction through the measures in package A, much cheaper. And it's really a no-brainer to do that, also much faster and much better for everybody in terms of the environmental impact, in terms of the health impacts as well, and in terms of quality of life and benefit for everybody, not just for car drivers. And the third point that I wanted to come on to was the points made by a number of colleagues about wanting to invest in the economy of our city, supporting jobs, supporting growth, supporting development. And I share those concerns, particularly at this time when we're facing such a difficult circumstance because of COVID. But I think we need to kind of think a little bit differently from old models, perhaps, which seem to assume that by enabling people to bypass the city entirely, that will somehow create growth. Actually, we want to make our city a place that people want to come into. We want it to be attractive to the students who are going to come to our newly launched university this week to come and study. Young people are more concerned than anybody else about the future of the environment. We want our city to be a place that visitors will come to, tourists will come to. We're investing in that as an administration in a way that's been sadly neglected for many, many years. We will encourage people to come here as visitors, not by building a bypass, but by making it a beautiful place to walk and cycle in. And we want to encourage the productivity of businesses. And as Councillor Norman said earlier, there's loads of evidence that shows that cities thrive best when these active travel measures are put in place and buses are put in place to help people get into the city. So we absolutely believe that these are the best measures for the economy, and they are offered by far the best value for money. The most environmentally damaging and eye-wateringly expensive way of addressing congestion is a Western bypass, and I'm frankly surprised that some colleagues are still arguing for this when it goes so clearly against the direction of what even the Minister for Transport is now saying. Thank you.
Chairman, I've been accused of misleading the meeting, so with respect,
Yes,
I would like to come back on that.
Yes,
and I would ask Mr. Brooks to help me and answer that question. Councillor Chowns refers to stakeholders, when Mr. Brooks will tell you that some of the stakeholders declined to comment. So to say that stakeholders had a specific view on the matter is in itself misleading. And if you ask Mr. Brooks about the public consultation, one of the things that they came back with the most was another crossing and more buses. So I don't think you can accuse me of misleading people by making the statements that I made.
Okay, I think we'll finish it at that, and we'll go on to Councillor Davis.
Yeah, there's about three things here. Firstly, Councillor Matthews, I stood as an independent, not as part of your independence, and I gave up a lot to be able to stand as an independent. So I'm not going to be thankful for anybody other than myself. Secondly, please can people not refer to businessmen, it's business people. There are lots of amazing women business people in Herefordshire. Third one is the best thing about being an independent is when you can say things about every single party. And Councillor Harrington, You said park and choose. There has been park and choose in Herefordshire for quite some time, utilising farms and utilising pubs. So I think it's right and fair for us to say that. So yes, it has been in place. I think what we're suggesting is a lot more money going into them. So that's only fair. And the final one is recommendation K, that says that we abandon the Western bypass and reject other road infrastructure schemes, and barring only the Eastern River crossing option. I think that's a little bit confusing for me as a recommendation, because I've already said I can't commit as a member to not having another river crossing, but also that my preferred option would be that we went further than just a bridge. So I just want a little bit of clarification around that, because from my perspective, anything that just puts traffic onto Hampton Park Road would be a disaster. I think it would need to go further onto Ledbury Road. So I just wanted a bit of clarification on that before we agree to a recommendation that says that the extra part to Ledbury Road will be discounted.
Councillor Harrington, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, I want to come back and apologise for saying we didn't have park and rides. Well, we didn't have park and choose, because we did, and I take, you know, I didn't mean to besmirch the efforts of the previous administration. They did have those in, and they have worked. But what I think I meant that we would like to put some serious investment and increase the sizes to a more medium size, and to increase them around the city. But that is a fair point. I can't remember the other points now.
Yeah, well, the other point is about abandoning the Western bypass.
Well, the recommendation was to consider that, and you know, as a
no,
group.
Councillor Harrington, it's not. What the recommendation says is barring only the Eastern River crossing option, and my understanding is that's more to do with F. And if I was to agree to a recommendation, it would actually be E for me, that goes further and it goes to Ledbury Road. I couldn't commit to one that's
okay. Well, that's fine. That's the point of this conversation. That's fine,
yeah.
Councillor. Understood. I think, you know, maybe I'm too easy to not placate. That's not the right word, but.
So I think perhaps the monitoring officer, perhaps Claire, you can just help me through this next part. So the recommendations which we've got kind of drafted is A, that the Cabinet notes and considers the review findings and the recommendations and comments of the General Scrutiny Committee. I think we're probably okay with that one. Identify strategic transport packages. So I think we are saying A, part of B. Are we saying any part of C as well?
All of B.
All of B.
Yeah, A, all of B.
I've got Councillor Harvey has her hand up. I think she might have some direction on this as well.
Yeah, and the thing about packages B and C is that they share some common options within them. The reason that I'm really keen is that B has got the package in there about sorting out the school transport. And I think if we choose C over B, and C doesn't have the school transport, doesn't have the electric buses, the bus priority element that is in C doesn't actually have us creating any more buses on the roads in Hereford. It's just providing priority for the ones that are already there. So my suggestion, my proposal would be that we had the entirety of package B, which has some elements of package C in it anyway, and that we also include from package C the option which is headed demand management, but actually covers several different things. I think we've dismissed congestion charging as not really being appropriate for a city the size of Hereford, but it does have in it managing car parking, and I think that's an important dimension that we have to take alongside providing other options, so that we make sure that we modify the offering for car parking to reflect the changing range of transport offers that come forward as A and B get delivered. So I'm recommending A and B for us, with the parking elements from the demand management option in C. And then, you know, from the earlier comments that I made, if we're going to recognise that for resilience and choice, we provide a second river crossing for people who live, work and visit the city, that the best value for money way of delivering that is E, which takes the road from Rotherwas through to the Ledbury Road.
Okay, I think I see nobody disagreeing with that. So I'll then move on to the next one, which is agree the recommendation of ATOM of the General Scrutiny Committee, which is set out in Appendix E. But we don't agree K, because that just has an Eastern River crossing option. We're going for E. Are there other elements? I think that's probably the only element we definitely disagree with. The others we will consider. Yeah, okay, see no disagreement with that. And then D seeks a further report to set out the implications of taking forward the preferred packages and confirms authority for subsequent work to proceed. I think we've agreed that. And then E, with regard to the two road schemes, we agree, I think, to stop both. Councillor Harvey.
Well, as the cabinet member responsible for finance, I think if we're going to go with the recommendations in terms of making further progress on those combined transport packages, I think we have to be clear that for our external auditors and for our own accounts, that we're clear on ceasing these two road packages. And what I'd like to do is ask officers to provide us with a report on what the money movement is that we need to do as a consequence of making that decision, because clearly there is going to be a financial implication to that, because elements of those pieces of work have been capitalised. And I don't think we can credibly pursue the options that we're talking about here whilst leaving those two road projects kind of in the pending pile. So I think we have to be clear in our accounts and with our auditors that we're recognising that this review has to come to a decision on those other two road packages.
Yeah, so the monitoring officer nodding her head, so I guess that can be incorporated in the final.
Yes, Leader. I mean, what's intended is, as a result of your vote today, there will be a further report in December setting out what the implications are financially and in relation to the policy framework in taking forward those preferred packages.
Okay, so the general agreement, you think, on that? Okay.
Steve, did you? Sorry, Leader. I'm not sure. Steve Burgess wanted to say something.
Yeah. So just clarification from Claire. I think was the cabinet report we were looking at if there was a follow-up early January, Claire, rather than December. Prior to.
Happy to be corrected on that.
Okay, thanks.
I know we're heading for council in January. So if I can just confirm, Leader, you've had a proposal that was proposed by Councillor Harvey, and just needs to be seconded in relation to recommendation B. And that is that it's package A, B and C, which is option 11, demand management parking, and package E.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Crockett. Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
It's not the entirety of C. It is only the demand management option within the C package.
I believe, if I was following you correctly, it's option 11 within that, demand management, and the sub below that, which is the parking, car parking. I believe then, Leader, you're ready to be able to take the vote.
And as regards E, we are saying to agree. Do you have wording for that, Claire?
So with package E is part
No.
of, you mean recommendation
no.
E?
Recommendation E.
Recommendation D is that you will be proposing to council, because you cannot take the decision because it's contrary to policy, that those two schemes are stopped.
But first, we want to make it clear what the financial implications are. Or...
I believe you're making the recommendation today to stop those schemes. The further report will be the implications on the packages.
Okay. Councillor Harvey, is that your understanding?
Well, yes, I think we can't rally on this. I think we have to be clear, and I don't think we can leave them in the pending pile. So, you know, if we're not going to be pursuing them, then the only logical consequence of that is that we're not going to be pursuing them.
And if I can confirm, that's the debate at council. That's the full decision at council, which is the implications of stopping those schemes.
Okay.
I can't have, from the finance perspective, I can't have this uncertainty, if you like, hanging over the capitalisation of these two pieces of work. Clear on it?
Absolutely right. Yeah. Okay. So do you have Claire? Do you have the wording for recommendation E? So it says, with regard to the two road schemes, the Southern Link Road and the Western Bypass agrees to...
It's the first option.
Leader, so it's to stop progress of the Southern Ring Road and stop progress of the Western Bypass.
Okay, and we don't need it subject to the further report. It's just that we will have to go to council.
Yes, it can only be a recommendation because it is contrary to policy.
Okay, fine. So is everybody clear about that? So the recommendation is that the Cabinet A notes and considers the review findings and recommendations and comments of the General Scrutiny Committee. B, identifies strategic packages A, B and the elements of C which the Monitoring Officer has as the preferred option to take forward. Agrees recommendations A to M to the Scrutiny General Committee set out in Appendix E, with the exception of K. D seeks a further report to set out the implications of taking forward the preferred packages and confirms authority for subsequent works to proceed. And E, with regard to the two road schemes, agrees to stop progress of the Southern Link Road and stop progress of the Western Bypass. So I'll now ask the Cabinet members to vote on that recommendation. Please can non-voting attendees be moved to the breakout room and the number of voting members confirmed.
Leader, there are 8 voting members.
Thank you. Everybody can cast their votes.
And they may cast their vote now. I'm just waiting on one, Leader. And that's now in. Those have been unanimously approved, Leader.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, that recommendation has been passed. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending this meeting. The next meeting is planned for Thursday, the 17th of December. That's a cabinet meeting. There's a council meeting a week tomorrow, and then one the following week. And we're going to have a couple probably in, at least, yes, maybe one, maybe two in January. So busy times ahead, and we move forward. Thank you very much.
Leader, can I just check one thing? Did we include E in that back in that was captured? Was it Claire in the recommendation wording?
Yes, it was.
Okay, I didn't hear him. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I'll ask the live feed to be closed now. Thank you.